When armed mercenaries stormed his quiet repair shop, hunting a bleeding CEO, small-town mechanic Caleb Mercer had two choices: hide like the peaceful father he'd become, or unleash the Navy SEAL he'd buried 6 years ago. He chose violence. But saving Ava Kensington's life would resurrect ghosts from his darkest mission and reveal she wasn't the tech billionaire she believed herself to be. Stay until the end to discover the truth that connected them long before this day, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. The October sky hung low over Millstone, Pennsylvania, thick with the kind of gray that made 3 p.m. feel like dusk. Caleb Mercer stood in the open bay of his repair shop, wrench in hand, motor oil staining his forearms, when he heard it, the desperate shriek of tires pushed beyond their limit, the mechanical scream of an engine eating itself alive. He looked up. A black Mercedes S-Class rocketed around the corner doing at least 70, fishtailing violently as the driver overcorrected. Smoke poured from beneath the crushed hood. The front bumper dragged against asphalt, throwing sparks that looked like dying stars against the gray afternoon. The car wasn't slowing down. It was aimed directly at his shop. "Riley!" Caleb's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "Back room, now!" His 8-year-old daughter looked up from her homework spread across the office desk, her dark curls bouncing as she startled. She'd inherited her mother's eyes, sharp, observant, missing nothing. Those eyes found her father's face, read something there that made her move without question. She ran. Good girl. The Mercedes mounted the curb with a bone-jarring crunch, plowed through his hand-painted Mercer's Auto Repair sign, and slammed to a smoking stop 3 feet from his tool bench. The impact sent a socket wrench set clattering to the concrete floor like metal rain. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. Then the driver's door opened. She practically fell out, a woman in her early 30s, wearing what had once been an expensive charcoal suit, now torn at the shoulder and stained dark with something that looked too much like blood. Her blonde hair, probably styled that morning into something professional, now hung in wild tangles across a face pale with shock and streaked with crimson from a gash above her left eyebrow. But it was her eyes that stopped Caleb cold. Hazel eyes, wide with terror so pure it looked like madness. Eyes that kept darting to the street behind her, tracking something he couldn't yet see but she knew was coming. He'd seen eyes like that before. In Kandahar. In Mosul. In places whose names were still classified. Eyes of someone who'd just learned what it felt like to be hunted. "Help me." Her voice cracked on the words. She staggered, caught herself against the steaming hood, left a bloody handprint on the black paint. "Please, God, they're coming. They're right behind me." Caleb's mind performed the calculations it had been trained to perform, the threat assessment happening in the space between heartbeats. The woman, civilian, injured, terrified. The car, high-end luxury vehicle, bulletproof glass installed, definitely not factory. The blood on her face, fresh, still flowing. The way she kept her right arm tight against her ribs, broken, bruised, bullet wound? And then he heard them. The sound came before the sight, a low, predatory rumble of multiple engines perfectly synchronized. Not the desperate flight of her Mercedes, but the controlled approach of professionals who knew exactly where their target was going and had all the time in the world to catch her. 3 black SUVs emerged from the mist like sharks materializing from murky water. Cadillac Escalades, windows tinted beyond legal limits, no license plates visible. They moved in formation, 1 center, 2 flanking, the kind of tactical approach you didn't learn in civilian driving schools. The vehicles stopped in a perfect arc across his shop's entrance, blocking every angle of escape. Caleb felt something old and familiar unfold in his chest. Something he'd spent 6 years trying to bury beneath oil changes and school pickup schedules and bedtime stories. Something that recognized predators when it saw them. The SUV's doors opened in perfect unison. 6 men emerged. They wore tactical gear, black cargo pants, dark jackets cut loose to conceal body armor, boots built for violence, not fashion. No visible weapons yet, but Caleb could read their silhouettes, could see the way their jackets hung heavy on the right side, could track the professional spacing they maintained as they spread out. Armed, trained, dangerous. The woman beside the Mercedes made a sound like a wounded animal. "No, no, no, no!" The lead man stepped forward, tall, probably 6'3", with a shaved head and the kind of build that came from military discipline, not gym vanity. His eyes swept the shop with the mechanical precision of a threat assessment, cataloging exits, weapons, witnesses. Those eyes landed on Caleb. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Caleb kept his posture loose, unthreatening. Just a small-town mechanic in a grease-stained Henley and jeans, holding a wrench, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. His expression carefully neutral, almost bored. But his feet had already shifted to a balanced stance, his weight distributed for movement, his free hand drifting casually toward the tool bench where his pry bar leaned against the wall, 18 inches of solid steel that could break bone with the right application of force. The lead man's eyes narrowed slightly. Recognition, Caleb thought. Not of his face. He'd been careful about that when he disappeared 6 years ago, but of something deeper. The way one predator recognizes another. Smart man would walk away right now. The lead man's voice carried the flat affect of someone used to being obeyed. This isn't your business. The woman stumbled toward Caleb, one hand reaching out. Please don't let them. Miss Kensington. The lead man's voice sharpened. You've caused enough trouble today. Time to come home. Kensington. The name pulled at something in Caleb's memory, but he pushed it aside. Later. Right now the math was simple. 6 armed men, 1 injured woman, 1 civilian shop with his daughter 20 feet away behind a hollow core door that wouldn't stop a determined kick, much less a bullet. The smart play was obvious. Step aside. Let them take her. Call the cops after they left. Be a good witness. Keep Riley safe. That's what Caleb Mercer, small-town mechanic and single father, would do. But Caleb Mercer the mechanic was a performance. A carefully constructed fiction he'd been playing for 6 years, ever since the night he'd buried his wife, and decided his daughter would never lose another parent to violence. Underneath that performance lived someone else. Someone who'd once had a different name, a different life, a different purpose. Someone who'd made a promise, carved into granite at Arlington. Never leave a fallen comrade. And the woman bleeding in his shop, whether she knew it or not, was definitely fallen. Caleb's hand closed around the pry bar. Shop's closed, he said quietly. You're going to need to leave. The lead man's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a tightening, a preparation. Last chance to walk away. Already gave you yours. Caleb's voice stayed level, conversational even. He'd learned a long time ago that the most dangerous men didn't need to shout. Leave. Now, or we're going to have a problem. One of the other men, shorter, stockier, with a scar running through his eyebrow, actually laughed. You really want to do this, mechanic? 6 of us. 1 of you? Caleb looked at him, really looked at him. Let him see what had been carefully hidden behind 6 years of friendly smiles and small-town pleasantries. The laughter died. Get inside, Caleb said to the woman without taking his eyes off the men. Back room, second door on the left. There's a girl in there, Riley. Stay with her. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. I can't. They'll kill you. Inside, now. Something in his voice made her move. She staggered toward the back, leaving bloody footprints on concrete Caleb had just pressure washed last weekend. The lead man sighed. Your funeral. He nodded. The 6 men reached for their weapons, and Caleb Mercer stopped pretending. The first rule of close-quarters combat isn't about strength or speed or even skill. It's about violence of action, moving so fast and so decisively that your enemy's decision-making process can't keep up. Caleb moved. The pry bar whistled through the air and caught the lead man's reaching hand before his pistol cleared leather. Bone cracked. The gun clattered to the floor. Caleb was already pivoting, using the momentum of his first strike to fuel the second, backhanded strike to the temple of the man on his right, who dropped like someone had cut his strings. 2 seconds. 2 men down. The other 4 finally processed what was happening. Gunfire erupted in the enclosed space, impossibly loud. Caleb was already moving, using the first SUV as cover. Bullets punched through his shop's walls, turned his customer waiting area into splinters and drywall dust. Riley. The thought was ice water down his spine. But no, the back room was reinforced. He'd made sure of that. After Jessica's death, After the nightmares started, he'd spent 3 months secretly turning that room into something that could withstand exactly this scenario. Concrete walls behind the drywall, steel door behind the wood veneer. It would hold. It had to hold. Caleb grabbed his propane torch from the workbench, cranked it open full blast, and used his Zippo to turn it into a 6-foot flamethrower. He came around the SUV at a sprint, flame preceding him, and caught one of the shooters square in the face. The man screamed, stumbled backward, his tactical jacket catching fire. 3 left standing. They tried to spread out, establish fields of fire, use their training, but this was Caleb's territory, and he knew every inch of it. He grabbed a floor jack, 60 pounds of solid steel, and hurled it like a discus at the man trying to flank left. It caught him in the knees with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a watermelon. The man went down shrieking. The last 2 finally got smart. They retreated, firing controlled bursts to cover their withdrawal, dragging their wounded with them. Professional. Disciplined. They'd lost this fight, but they were experienced enough to know when to cut their losses. Caleb let them go. He wasn't a SEAL anymore. He was a father, and his daughter was still in the back room. The SUV's engines roared to life. Tires shrieked. They were gone in seconds, leaving only the smell of gun smoke and burned rubber and scorched meat. Silence crashed down like a physical thing. Caleb stood in the wreckage of his shop, his carefully constructed normal life scattered in pieces across blood-stained concrete, and felt the old darkness rising up from where he'd buried it. "Dad?" Riley's voice, small, scared, but steady. He turned. She stood in the doorway to the back room, the injured woman's hand on her shoulder. His daughter's dark eyes swept across the destruction, taking it all in with that too-sharp perception that sometimes scared him because she was so much like her mother. "Are the bad men gone?" Riley asked. "Yeah, baby, they're gone." "Are they coming back?" The question every father dreads, the one that doesn't have a comfortable lie attached. Caleb looked at the woman. Kensington, the lead man had called her. She stood there in her torn suit and blood-matted hair, staring at him like he'd just sprouted wings. "Yeah," he said quietly, "they're probably coming back." Riley processed this. Nodded once, that serious little nod she did when she was thinking through a problem. "Then we should call the police." "We should." But Caleb was already thinking past that. The men who'd just left weren't random thugs. They were professionals, military-grade contractors, the kind with resources and connections and the ability to disappear evidence. The kind who didn't leave witnesses. The kind Caleb knew all too well. His phone was already in his hand, but he wasn't calling the local police. He was calling a number he hadn't dialed in 6 years, one he'd memorized but never written down. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Talk." "This is Ghost 7. Caleb used his old call sign, the one that was supposed to be buried with his SEAL career. "I need a cleanup crew and a safe house. Civilian in danger, military-grade pursuit. They'll be back with reinforcements." A pause. Then, "Ghost 7 is dead." "He's back, and he's got his daughter with him, so I need that safe house, Marcus. Now." Another pause, longer this time. "Location?" Caleb gave it, hung up, looked at the woman who'd brought violence to his doorstep and might have just cost him the peaceful life he'd built for Riley. "Who are you?" he asked. She was still staring at him, still processing what she'd just witnessed. "I'm Ava Kensington. I run Kensington Tech. And you—" Her voice cracked. "You're not a mechanic." "I'm a father," Caleb said. "The rest doesn't matter." "It's going to matter when they come back." Ava's hand pressed against her ribs, came away bloody. "Because next time they won't send 6 men. They'll send 20, and they won't stop until I'm dead and everyone who helped me is buried beside me." Riley's hand slipped into Caleb's. Her small fingers squeezed tight. "Then you'd better tell me," Caleb said quietly, "why you're worth killing." The story Ava Kensington told, sitting in Caleb's small office while Riley fetched first aid supplies, and Caleb kept one eye on the street, was the kind of nightmare that usually lived in classified briefings and conspiracy theories. 2 years ago, she explained, her company had been approached by a Department of Defense contractor. They wanted to fund a research project, something cutting edge, something that would revolutionize modern warfare. At first it seemed legitimate. military applications for civilian technology, the kind of public-private partnership that happened all the time. The project was called Helix. Artificial intelligence, Ava said, wincing as Caleb cleaned the gash above her eyebrow with practiced efficiency. His hands were steady, gentle despite their size. But not like anything that exists. Not chatbots or recommendation algorithms. This was predictive combat AI, something that could analyze battlefield data in real time, predict enemy movements, coordinate drone strikes, all without human oversight. Autonomous weapons, Caleb said. His voice stayed neutral, but his jaw tightened. Smart autonomous weapons. Things that could learn, adapt, make decisions. We built it in 18 months. Ava's eyes went distant, haunted. It was beautiful. Terrifying, but beautiful. Then I found out what they really wanted it for. She'd discovered the truth by accident. A misrouted email, a file left unencrypted. Helix wasn't meant for battlefield deployment. It was designed for domestic surveillance and control. Political targeting. A tool to identify, track, and eliminate threats before they became threats. The kind of technology that turned democracy into theater. I tried to shut it down, Ava said. Deleted the core code, destroyed the backups, went to the press. But the people behind it, they're connected everywhere. DoD, CIA, private contractors. They made the evidence disappear, made the journalists disappear. And then they came for me. How long have you been running? 3 days. Ava laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass. Feels like 3 years. They've been one step behind me the whole time. I thought if I could get far enough away from the city, somewhere small and quiet, I could figure out my next move. She looked around the shop, at the bullet holes and bloodstains. Guess I was wrong. Riley appeared in the doorway with the first aid kit, her movements careful, deliberate. She'd seen her mother die in violence, a roadside bomb in Afghanistan that had killed Jessica and 3 other contractors. She'd been too young to remember it, but trauma lived in the body even when the mind couldn't recall. Here, Dad, Riley said, handing over the kit. Then to Ava, you're bleeding a lot. I know, sweetheart. Your dad's fixing me up. He's good at that. Riley's dark eyes studied Ava with that unsettling intensity. Are you going to stay for dinner? The question was so normal, so achingly innocent in the aftermath of gunfire and death, that Ava actually laughed. A real laugh this time, touched with something like wonder. If your dad will have me. We don't really have a choice, Caleb said, butterfly bandaging the cut closed. They saw me fight, saw you come here. This shop's burned now, they'll be back, and they'll bring enough firepower to level the building. I'm sorry, Ava's voice broke. I didn't mean to drag you into this, I was desperate, and your shop was the first one I saw, and… Stop, Caleb's hand on her shoulder, firm but not unkind. You made it here. That's what matters. Now we need to figure out how to keep you alive. There's no keeping me alive. Ava's eyes were hollow. Don't you understand? These people, they're untouchable. They have unlimited resources, unlimited reach. I'm already dead. I'm just taking my time about it. Nobody's untouchable. Caleb's voice carried an edge now, something cold and sharp. And nobody's dead until they're dead. You ran this far. You survived this long. That means you've got fight in you. So stop talking like a corpse and start thinking like a survivor. Ava stared at him. Who are you? Someone who used to kill people for a living, Caleb said simply, and I was very, very good at it. Riley tugged on his sleeve. Dad, are we going somewhere? He looked down at his daughter, at the trust in her eyes, the absolute faith that her father could fix anything. It was a weight that crushed him and kept him standing all at once. Yeah, baby, we're taking a little trip. Remember that bag I made you pack? The one I said was for emergencies? The go bag? That's the one. Can you grab it for me? She nodded and darted off. 8 years old and already learning evacuation protocols. The thought made Caleb's chest tight with guilt and pride in equal measure. Ava watched her go. You've been preparing for this. I've been preparing for something. After my wife died. Caleb's voice caught, steadied. After Jessica, I promised myself Riley would never be a soft target. So I made plans, exit strategies, safe houses, go bags, The kind of paranoid preparation that probably makes me sound crazy. Or smart. Or both. Caleb's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Package ready, address attached, move fast. We need to go, Caleb said. Now. They'll have regrouped by now, probably called in reinforcements. We've got maybe 20 minutes before this place is swarming with shooters. Ava stood, tested her weight on her legs. Steady enough. The adrenaline was still holding, though Caleb could see the crash coming in the way her hands trembled. Where are we going? Somewhere they can't follow. Friend of mine from my old life. He's got a place off the grid, secure. We hole up there, figure out our next move. You keep saying we. Ava's voice was soft. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You could just hand me over, tell them I forced you to fight. Go back to your normal life. Caleb was already moving, grabbing essentials. His go bag from the safe under his desk, Riley's backpack, the emergency cash he kept taped behind the water heater. Because normal's over. The second those men saw my face, saw what I could do, I became a loose end. They won't leave witnesses, so your fight's my fight now, whether I like it or not. It wasn't entirely true. The real reason was simpler, uglier. The moment he'd seen Ava's terrified eyes, the moment he'd heard the fear in her voice, something in him had snapped to attention. Not the father, not the mechanic, the soldier, the protector. The man who'd taken an oath a lifetime ago. I will never leave a fallen comrade. And Ava Kensington, bleeding and hunted and refusing to surrender, was definitely a comrade. Riley returned with her go bag, a small pink backpack filled with clothes, snacks, her favorite stuffed rabbit, and, Caleb had insisted, a first aid kit and a flashlight. She wore her serious expression, the one that made her look far older than 8. Ready, Dad. Good girl. He kissed the top of her head, breathed in the apple-scented shampoo from her morning bath. We're going on an adventure. It might be a little scary, but I need you to be brave. Can you do that? Like Mom was brave? The question hit him in the chest like a punch. Yeah, baby, exactly like Mom. Riley nodded, squared her small shoulders. Then I can do it. They moved fast. Caleb's truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that looked like every other work truck in rural Pennsylvania, was parked out back, away from the street where the shooters could see it. He loaded their bags, helped Ava into the back seat, and buckled Riley into her booster seat. Stay down, he told Ava. If shooting starts, cover Riley with your body. Understand? She nodded, her face pale, but set. Caleb slid behind the wheel, keyed the ignition. The truck rumbled to life, familiar and steady. He pulled out of the lot using the back exit, a dirt road that wound through scrub woods before connecting to the rural highway system. They made it exactly 4 miles before the first SUV appeared in his rearview mirror. Contact rear, Caleb said calmly, like he was narrating a training exercise and not his daughter's potential death. 2 vehicles. Escalades again. They're not trying to hide anymore. Ava twisted to look. They found us. How did they... Doesn't matter. Caleb's hands were steady on the wheel. Riley, baby, remember what we practiced? Head down, hands over your ears, stay in your seat. Okay, Daddy. His heart broke at the trust in her voice, but there was no time for that. The Escalades were accelerating, closing the distance with professional precision. Any second now they'd start shooting. Caleb's phone rang. Marcus. Little busy right now, Caleb said, putting it on speaker. I see them. Marcus's voice was clipped, efficient. 2 more vehicles coming from the north to intercept. You're boxed in, Ghost. Yeah, I noticed. Options? Take the next left. Old logging road, 3/4 of a mile. I've got assets in position. Assets. That meant Marcus had called in favors, pulled in people from their old life. It meant Caleb was officially back in the world he'd tried to leave. It meant Riley's childhood was over. Copy, Caleb said, and jerked the wheel left. The truck's tires screamed as he took the turn at 60, sliding through gravel and loose dirt. Behind them, the Escalades followed, their superior suspension handling the turn with ease. Gunfire erupted, controlled bursts from professional shooters who knew you aimed for the tires first, the engine block second, the occupants only when necessary. A bullet punched through his rear windshield. Riley screamed, I've got you, baby, Caleb shouted over the roar of the engine and the staccato crack of gunfire. Just stay down. The logging road appeared, barely visible, overgrown with weeds and young trees. Caleb didn't slow down. He crashed through the undergrowth like it wasn't there, his truck built for exactly this kind of punishment. Branches scraped his paint. Something metal underneath tore loose with a shriek. Behind them, the Escalades followed. And then, from the trees, came the salvation Marcus had promised. The explosion was perfectly placed, a shaped charge that took out the lead Escalade's front axle without killing anyone. The vehicle flipped, rolled, ended up on its side blocking the narrow road. The second Escalade slammed on its brakes, barely avoided crashing into its partner. Two men emerged from the tree line. Caleb recognized them both, Hernandez and Chen, old team members who'd supposedly retired to civilian life. They carried AR-15s with the casual confidence of men who'd been in more firefights than they could count. "Go!" Hernandez shouted, waving Caleb forward. "We'll hold them." Caleb didn't argue. He pressed the accelerator, his truck bouncing over ruts and rocks, putting distance between his daughter and the violence behind them. In the rearview mirror, he saw muzzle flashes, heard the distant crack of gunfire. Then the logging road curved, and the battle disappeared behind trees and distance. Riley was crying softly. Ava held her, murmuring something Caleb couldn't hear over the engine's roar. His daughter's small hand reached forward, grabbed his arm, squeezed. "We're okay, baby," Caleb said, praying it was true. "We're going to be okay." But as he drove through the darkening Pennsylvania woods, his phone showing the way to Marcus's safe house, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that okay was a country they'd just left forever. The safe house was a cabin 40 miles north, deep in state forest land that technically belonged to the government but practically belonged to no one. Marcus met them at the door, still built like a linebacker, still carrying himself with that quiet competence that had made him one of the best point men Caleb had ever served with. "Go 7, Marcus said, gripping Caleb's hand. "Been a long time." "Not long enough." Caleb ushered Riley and Ava inside. "Are we secure?" "As secure as we get. I've got Chen and Hernandez on overwatch, motion sensors on all approaches, and enough firepower to hold off a platoon. But Caleb," Marcus's expression darkened. "The people hunting your girl? They're connected. Really connected. I made some calls, asked some questions. What I heard scared me." "Tell me." Marcus glanced at Riley, who was exploring the cabin with wide eyes, and Ava, who'd collapsed onto a worn couch with the boneless exhaustion of someone who'd been running on fumes. He lowered his voice. "The contractor behind this? It's Vance Industries. Ring any bells?" Caleb went very still. "Colonel Vance?" "The same. He's been running Black Ops contracts since he retired from active duty. Built himself a little empire, private military, intelligence gathering, weapons development, and apparently illegal AI research." Colonel Rowan Vance. The name was a knife to Caleb's gut, opening old wounds he'd thought scarred over. Vance had been their commanding officer in Afghanistan. A brilliant tactician, a charismatic leader, and, as Caleb had learned too late, a man willing to sacrifice his own people for operational success. The mission that killed Jessica. The ambush that should never have happened. The orders that sent them into a kill zone with bad intel and insufficient support. Vance's orders. "It's connected," Caleb said slowly. "Jessica's death, Ava's AI, Vance. It's all connected." "Gets worse." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed Caleb a series of classified documents he absolutely shouldn't have had access to. "I did some digging. You're Ms. Kensington? She's not just a CEO, she's an asset. Deep cover, psychological conditioning, the whole 9 yards. She was an operative we pulled out of a hot zone 7 years ago. Some black site interrogation gone wrong. We extracted her, wiped her memory, rebuilt her identity." Caleb stared at the documents, at the photo attached to the file. A woman younger, thinner, her hair darker, but unmistakably the same face sitting on his couch. "She doesn't know," he said. "She doesn't remember. But somebody decided she'd outlived her usefulness. Probably got too close to something they wanted buried. So they activated her, pointed her at the AI project, and now they're cleaning up loose ends. She built Helix. She built it, realized what it was, and tried to destroy it. That made her a threat, and Vance doesn't leave threats alive. Caleb looked through the cabin's window at Ava, who sat with her head in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Riley sat beside her, small hand patting Ava's knee in comfort. "How do I stop this?" Caleb asked. "You don't." Marcus's voice was flat. "You grab your girl, you run, and you hope Vance forgets about you, because the alternative is war, and you left that life behind for a reason. That life just found me anyway." "Then maybe," Marcus said quietly, "it's time to finish what started in Afghanistan." Caleb stood there in the cabin's doorway, watching his daughter comfort a broken woman, and felt the last threads of his peaceful life unraveling. He'd become Caleb Mercer, the mechanic, to escape the violence, to give Riley something normal, to never let her see the darkness that had taken her mother. But the darkness had found them anyway, and now he had a choice: run and spend the rest of Riley's childhood looking over their shoulders, or fight, and maybe, just maybe, end this permanently. He thought of Jessica's last words, whispered as she died in his arms in that Afghan desert. Keep her safe. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Caleb walked to the couch, knelt in front of Ava. She looked up, her hazel eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "I know who's hunting you," he said, "and I know why. But I also know something you don't." "What?" 7 years ago, I led a SEAL team into a black site facility in Syria. We were there to extract an American operative who'd been compromised. The intel was bad, the extraction went sideways, and 3 of my guys died getting our target out. His voice stayed level, but his hands clenched into fists. "That operative was you, Ava. I pulled you out of that hellhole. I carried you through gunfire and explosions. And I promised myself that day that your suffering wouldn't be for nothing." Ava's face had gone white. "That's not possible. I can't remember." "They took your memories, rebuilt you into something useful, but the scars are still there." Caleb touched the side of her head, just above her ear, where a faint surgical scar was barely visible beneath her hair. "I saw them do this to you. I watched them turn you into someone else." Riley's small voice cut through the tension. "Are you going to save her again, Dad?" Caleb looked at his daughter, at the trust and fear and desperate hope in her eyes. "Yeah, baby," he said, "I'm going to save her again." And this time he was going to make sure the people who'd hurt her could never hurt anyone again. The silence that followed Caleb's revelation stretched like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. Ava sat frozen on the couch, her hand drifting unconsciously to the scar above her ear, touching it as if she could somehow pull the stolen memories from beneath her skin through sheer force of will. "You're lying." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the tremor in it said she knew he wasn't. "I would remember something like that. I would remember you." "They made sure you wouldn't." Caleb stood, walked to the cabin's window, keeping his eyes on the darkening tree line where Chen and Hernandez maintained their watch. "The conditioning they put you through, it's designed to bury trauma so deep you can't access it without triggers. But sometimes in dreams, pieces come back. Fragments. A face you can't quite place. A feeling of safety you can't explain." Ava's breathing had gone shallow. Riley, sensing the adult conversation had entered territory she didn't fully understand but recognized as dangerous, quietly retrieved her stuffed rabbit and moved to sit in a worn armchair, watching them both with those 2 observant eyes. "I do have dreams," Ava admitted. "There's one that keeps coming back. I'm in a dark room, and everything hurts, and I can hear voices speaking a language I don't understand. And then someone picks me up, strong arms, and there's this feeling like maybe I'm not going to die after all, but I can never see his face." "That was me." Caleb's reflection in the window glass looked like a ghost, pale and insubstantial. "We hit that facility at 0300. Intel said it was a weapons cache. Instead, we found a torture site, 6 prisoners, all American assets who'd been burned by their handlers. You'd been there 4 months by the time we found you. Broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, multiple contusions. They'd been interrogating you about something called Project Helix." The name landed like a physical blow. Ava's entire body jerked. "But I just started working on Helix 2 years ago. You're saying it existed before? That I knew about it before they wiped me?" "You didn't just know about it. Marcus stepped out from the cabin's small kitchen, carrying mugs of coffee that smelled like salvation and tasted like motor oil. He handed one to Caleb, one to Ava. According to the classified files I definitely shouldn't have access to, you designed the original prototype 7 years ago when you were working as a NOC, non-official cover operative, embedded in a Syrian tech firm. You were investigating a weapons development pipeline when you stumbled onto something bigger. An AI system, Caleb continued, accepting the story from Marcus like a relay baton in a race they were both running blind. Chinese and Russian intel services were collaborating on predictive combat algorithms. You managed to steal the core architecture before your cover got blown. That's why they grabbed you. They wanted their research back. Ava's hand shook so badly the coffee sloshed over the mug's rim, burning her fingers. She didn't seem to notice. And now someone's made me rebuild it. They took everything I knew, everything I was, and they turned me into a weapon aimed at myself. Vance, Caleb said. The name tasted like poison. He was our handler in Syria. When your extraction went bad, 3 of my guys died buying us enough time to get you out. And when we finally got back to base, Vance debriefed you personally. 4 hours alone in a room with him, and when you came out, you could barely walk. He broke her mind so he could rebuild it, Marcus finished. Classic intelligence play. Take someone with specialized knowledge, wipe their identity, implant a new one, and point them at your target. Ava Kensington, the CEO, was always a cover story, just one you believed. Riley's small voice cut through the heavy air like a knife through fog. So the bad men made her forget who she was, and now they want to kill her because she remembers? 3 adults turned to look at the 8-year-old who'd just summarized a complex psychological operation with devastating clarity. Something like that, baby, Caleb said. That's mean. Riley hugged her rabbit tighter. We should make them stop. Ava let out a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Out of the mouths of babes. Your daughter makes it sound simple. Maybe it is simple, Caleb said. Vance needs you dead because you're a liability, someone who knows too much and can't be controlled anymore. We take away his ability to kill you, and we solve the problem. How exactly do you propose we do that? Ava's voice had steadied, sharpened. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder. The survival instinct that had kept her alive through 4 months of interrogation, through 7 years of false memories, through 3 days of running for her life. He has unlimited resources. Private military contractors, government connections. We have 1 cabin in the woods and a handful of retired operators. We have something better. Caleb pulled out his phone, started scrolling through contacts he hadn't accessed in years. We have the truth, and we have proof. What proof? You. Caleb looked at her directly, letting her see the calculation in his eyes, the tactical assessment happening in real time. You're not just a loose end to Vance. You're evidence. Walking, talking evidence that he's been running illegal Black Ops programs for years. If we can get you somewhere safe, somewhere public, somewhere he can't touch you without exposing himself, he'll back off, Marcus finished. Maybe. Or he'll go scorched earth and kill everyone involved. Witnesses be damned. There's a third option. Ava set down her coffee, and Caleb saw the transformation happening in real time. The terrified CEO receding, something older and harder rising to replace her. Muscle memory her conscious mind didn't recognize, but her body remembered. We don't run. We don't hide. We go after him first. You want to attack a private military contractor with effectively unlimited resources. Marcus's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. That's not a plan. That's suicide with extra steps. Is it? Ava leaned forward, and her eyes had gone sharp as broken glass. Think about it. Vance spent years building his empire in the shadows. Everything he's done, the illegal operations, the black site torture, the stolen research, it all depends on secrecy. Expose him publicly, force him into the light, and his entire organization collapses. She's right, Caleb said slowly. He could see it now, the tactical picture forming like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their places. Vance can't afford a public investigation. It's not just about Helix or the AI research. If investigators start digging, they'll find bodies. Lots of bodies. Including my wife's. The last sentence came out harder than he'd intended, edged with 6 years of buried rage. Riley looked up, her expression unreadable, and Caleb forced himself to breathe. "Sorry, baby. I'm okay." "You don't sound okay." Riley's perception was, as always, uncomfortably accurate. "You sound angry." "I am angry, but I'm not going to let it make me stupid." He turned back to Ava. "You're talking about going on a fence. That means we need leverage, something big enough to force Vance into a corner where his only option is to back down." "The AI," Ava said immediately. "Helix. I destroyed the operational version, but I kept backups. Insurance in case something like this happened. The core code is stored on encrypted drives hidden in 3 separate locations. Vance doesn't know where they are," Caleb guessed. "He knows I have them. That's why he wants me dead so badly. The code is proof of everything. Military applications designed for domestic use, illegal surveillance protocols, kill chain algorithms that violate international law. If that goes public, it's not just Vance who goes down. It's his entire network of government sponsors." Marcus whistled low. "You're not talking about ending his career. You're talking about triggering a congressional investigation that could bring down half the intelligence community." "Good." Ava's voice was flat, cold. "Let it burn. They turned me into a weapon and aimed me at democracy itself. They deserve everything they get." Caleb studied her, seeing past the CEO mask to the operative underneath. The woman who'd survived months of torture without breaking. The woman who'd been conditioned to forget herself but somehow found the strength to remember. "Where are the drives?" he asked. "One in a safety deposit box in Manhattan. One buried in my mother's grave in Vermont. One hidden in the server room of my own company's headquarters in Boston." Ava's smile was bitter. "I figured if I died, someone would eventually find them. Maybe a lawyer going through my estate. Maybe a grieving family member. Someone would find them and ask questions." "Dead man's switch," Marcus said approvingly. "Smart. Not smart enough." Ava touched her ribs where the bullet had grazed her, winced. "I'm still alive, which means Vance is still scrambling to find those drives before I can use them. He'll have teams moving on all 3 locations right now. Then we need to move faster." Caleb was already planning, his mind shifting into the tactical mode that had once been second nature. "Marcus, how many of the old team can you pull in? For something like this, going up against Vance?" Marcus scrubbed a hand across his face, looking suddenly older. "Maybe 8, 10 guys. Everyone who served under you, who saw what happened in Afghanistan, who knows what Vance really is. But Caleb, these are retired operators with families now, civilian lives. You're asking them to risk everything." "I'm asking them to help me stop the man who got their brothers killed." Caleb's voice could have cut steel. "Vance sent us into that ambush knowing the intel was bad. He sacrificed our team and 4 civilian contractors, including my wife, to protect a weapons deal worth $500 million. I've got the proof. Classified documents that show he knew the route was compromised, knew there were hostiles in position, and sent us anyway." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Riley had gone still, her small body tense with the understanding that something enormous and terrible was being discussed. Marcus's jaw worked. "You've been sitting on that for 6 years?" "I've been waiting 6 years." Caleb's hands clenched into fists. "Waiting for the right moment, the right leverage. I couldn't go after him before. I had Riley to think about, a life to build, too much to lose. But he brought the war to my doorstep. He involved my daughter. That changes everything." "The guys need to know," Marcus said. "If we're doing this, if we're really going after Vance, everyone needs to understand what they're signing up for." "Make the calls." Caleb checked his watch. Nearly 8 p.m. They'd been at the cabin for 2 hours, which meant Vance's teams would be regrouping, planning their next move. Time was bleeding away. "Tell them we meet tomorrow at dawn. And Marcus, tell them to come ready for war." Marcus nodded once and stepped outside, phone already to his ear. Through the window, Caleb could see him pacing in the darkness, a shadow among shadows, making calls that would pull men out of retirement and back into the life they'd all tried to leave behind. Ava was watching Caleb with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're doing this for her, aren't you? For your wife." "I'm doing this for everyone he's killed, everyone he's hurt, everyone he's turned into a weapon or a casualty in his private war." Caleb moved to the couch, sat down heavily. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving behind the familiar ache of old injuries and older regrets. Jessica deserves justice. You deserve your life back, and my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where men like Vance can't operate with impunity. That's a nice speech, Ava said softly, but I've been in this world long enough to know, even if I can't consciously remember it, that justice is a fairy tale. Men like Vance don't go to prison. They get quietly retired with full pensions and consulting contracts. Not this time. Caleb's voice carried absolute conviction. This time, we make sure everyone sees exactly what he is. We make it so public, undeniable, that even his government sponsors can't protect him. Riley had been quiet for so long that Caleb had almost forgotten she was listening. Now she spoke up, her voice small but clear. Dad? Are you going to have to fight the bad men again? He wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her everything would be fine, that the adults would handle it, that she didn't need to worry. But Jessica had raised their daughter to value honesty, and Caleb wouldn't dishonor that memory with comfortable falsehoods. Yeah, baby, probably. Are you going to die? The question hit him like a fist to the solar plexus. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen. But Riley, I need you to understand something. The man who's after Ava, he's the same man who gave the orders that got your mom killed. And if I don't stop him now, he's going to keep hurting people, maybe forever. Riley processed this with that unsettling maturity that sometimes made her seem decades older than 8. Mom would want you to stop him. Yeah, Caleb's throat was tight. She would. Then you should. Riley stood, walked over with her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand, and climbed into her father's lap with the unconscious trust of a child who'd never known him to fail her. But you have to promise you'll come back. I promise I'll do everything I can. No. Riley's small hands grabbed his face, forced him to look directly into her eyes, Jessica's eyes. Promise you'll come back. For real. Caleb looked at his daughter, at the fierce determination in her expression, and felt something in his chest crack open. I promise, baby, I'll come back. It was a promise he had no right to make, a promise that might turn into a lie that would haunt Riley for the rest of her life. But it was also the only promise that mattered. Ava watched them, something complicated and painful flickering across her face. She's a hell of a kid. Takes after her mom. Caleb kissed the top of Riley's head. Bedtime, kiddo. It's been a long day. I'm not tired. Try anyway. We've got a big day tomorrow, and you need your rest. Riley sighed with the dramatic resignation of children everywhere, but she slid off his lap and headed toward the cabin's small bedroom. At the door, she paused. Ava? Yes, sweetheart? I'm glad my dad saved you, both times. Then she was gone, disappearing into the bedroom and closing the door with a soft click. Ava stared after her, and when she finally spoke, her voice was rough. How do you do it? Parent through something like this? Badly, Caleb admitted. I make it up as I go and hope I'm not screwing her up too much in the process. But she's tougher than she looks. She's had to be. Still, she shouldn't have to be tough. She should get to be a kid. Yeah, well, we don't always get what we should get. Caleb stood, moved to the kitchen to pour himself another cup of Marcus's terrible coffee. You should get some rest too. We've got maybe 6 hours before the team assembles, and you need to be sharp. I can't sleep. Ava joined him at the counter, leaning against it like it was the only thing holding her upright. Every time I close my eyes, I see pieces of memories that don't fit together. Your face, but younger. A room that smells like blood and fear. Voices speaking Arabic, Russian, English with an accent I can't place. It's all there, just beneath the surface, but I can't quite reach it. Don't force it. Caleb kept his voice gentle. Trauma has its own timeline. The memories will come back when they're ready, or they won't. Either way, you're still you. Am I? Ava's laugh was hollow. I don't even know who me is anymore. The CEO was a fiction. The operative I was before, I can't remember her. So what's left? Who am I when you strip away all the lies? You're someone who survived. Caleb met her eyes over the rim of his coffee mug. You're someone who looked at an illegal weapons project and chose to destroy it, even though you knew it would cost you everything. You're someone who ran for 3 days straight rather than give up. That's not nothing, Ava. That's who you are when everything else gets burned away. She was quiet for a long moment, absorbing that. Then, in the shop, when you were fighting those men, you moved like, I don't know, like violence was a language you spoke fluently. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. I was a SEAL for 12 years. Violence was my job. Caleb set down his mug, suddenly unable to meet her eyes. I was good at it. Too good. After Jessica died, I realized I'd spent so much time being good at killing that I'd forgotten how to be good at living. That's why I left. Why I became a mechanic. I wanted Riley to have a father who fixed things instead of breaking them. But you're about to break things again. This time it's different. This time I'm not following orders. I'm not a weapon in someone else's war. He did look at her then, and his eyes were hard as winter. This time, I choose the target. Ava held his gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Two people who'd been remade by violence, trying to find their way back to something that looked like normal, only to discover that normal was a country they could never return to. "What's the plan?" she asked finally. "Specifically, how do we take down someone as connected as Vance?" We hit him on 3 fronts simultaneously. Caleb's mind was already mapping it out, seeing the operation from satellite view. Team 1 goes to Manhattan, secures the drive from your safety deposit box. Team 2 hits Vermont, retrieves the one from your mother's grave. Team 3, that'll be me, you, and a small group, we go to Boston and get the drive from your company's server room. Vance will have people watching all 3 locations. Counting on it. We make noise, draw his resources out, force him to split his attention. While his teams are engaged at the 3 sites, we leak everything to the press. Every major outlet. Network news, cable news, newspapers, online journalists. By the time Vance realizes what's happening, the story will be too big to contain. And if he kills us before we can leak it? Then the dead man's switch activates. Caleb pulled out his phone, showed her a series of timed emails he'd already prepared. I've set up automated releases through multiple encrypted services. If I don't check in every 12 hours and enter a specific code, everything we have on Vance, documents, testimony, evidence, gets released automatically. He can kill us, but he can't stop the truth. Ava studied the phone screen, and a slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd spent 7 years being used as a tool and had finally remembered she had teeth. "You've done this before, planned an operation like this." "Once or twice, though usually I was on the other side, the one trying to stop the leak, not cause it." Caleb pocketed his phone. "But the principles are the same: redundancy, multiple fail-safes, always have a backup plan for your backup plan." "And your backup plan here is? If everything goes to hell, we grab Riley and run. New identities, new country, new life. I've got passports prepared, accounts set up, contacts who owe me favors in places extradition treaties don't reach." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing a grocery list instead of international flight from justice. "I won't let Riley pay the price for my war with Vance." "But you'd rather not run." "I'd rather end this permanently, for Riley's sake, for yours. For everyone else Vance would hurt if we don't stop him." Caleb's hands clenched on the counter. "Running means looking over our shoulders forever. Fighting means maybe, just maybe, we get to live without fear." The cabin door opened and Marcus stepped back inside, his face grim. "Made the calls. 8 confirmed. They'll be here by 0600, but Caleb, you need to know, these guys have kids now, mortgages, normal lives. If it goes bad, I take full responsibility. Anyone who wants out, no judgment, no hard feelings." Caleb straightened, meeting his old friend's eyes. "But I'm doing this with or without backup. Vance has been operating above the law for too long. Someone needs to hold him accountable." "It's not about backing out." Marcus moved to the coffee pot, poured himself another cup of the sludge he called coffee. "It's about making sure everyone understands the stakes. We're not going after some random target. Vance has connections that go all the way to the Pentagon. If we come at him and miss, if he survives with enough power to retaliate, he won't." Ava's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Because I'm not just going to expose what he's done. I'm going to expose who he's working with. Every senator who took his money, every general who looked the other way, every intelligence official who signed off on his operations. When I'm done, there won't be anyone left to protect him. Marcus whistled low. You really want to burn down the entire house? The house is rotten. Ava's eyes were cold. Better to burn it and build something new than keep patching the foundation. Spoken like someone who's never had to live through the aftermath of that kind of chaos. But Marcus was smiling slightly, the kind of smile soldiers wore when they knew the mission was insane but were going to do it anyway. Fine, we go full scorched earth, but we do it smart, coordinated, and we make damn sure Riley stays somewhere safe while it's happening. Already handled. Caleb had been thinking about this since the moment he'd decided to fight instead of run. I've got a contact. Woman I served with in Iraq, retired now, runs a ranch in Montana. No connection to any of this, no way for Vance to trace her. Riley goes there tomorrow morning, first thing. She's not going to like that. Marcus's observation was mild, but accurate. She doesn't have to like it. She just has to be alive. Caleb's voice left no room for argument. This is non-negotiable. Riley gets out of the line of fire before anything else happens. Ava was watching him with that unreadable expression again. You really think we can win this, against everything Vance has? I think we have to try. Caleb met her eyes. Because if we don't, he'll keep using people like weapons, keep destroying lives, keep operating like the law doesn't apply to him. And maybe that's fine for everyone who doesn't know what he is. But we know. We've seen behind the curtain. That means we're responsible for what happens next. That's a hell of a burden to carry. Yeah. Caleb's smile was tired. I've been carrying it for 6 years. Might as well do something useful with it. The conversation drifted then into logistics and details. Equipment they'd need, weapons, vehicles, timing, the 1,000 small details that separated a plan from a fantasy. Marcus coordinated with Chen and Hernandez, confirming watch schedules and perimeter security. Ava made lists of everything she remembered about Helix, about Vance's operation, about the people who might be involved. And through it all, Caleb kept half his attention on the bedroom door, on the daughter sleeping beyond it, on the promise he'd made that might turn into the last lie he ever told. Around midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with them. Marcus took first watch. Ava crashed on the couch, asleep almost before her head hit the cushion. Caleb checked on Riley, found her curled around her stuffed rabbit, breathing softly, peaceful in a way that made his chest ache. Then returned to the living room. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in the darkness, cleaning and checking weapons he'd hoped never to touch again, preparing for a war he'd spent 6 years trying to avoid. Outside, the Pennsylvania forest was alive with night sounds. Owls hunting, small animals rustling through undergrowth, the wind moving through pine branches like whispered warnings. And somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond their small circle of light, Colonel Rowan Vance was planning his next move, marshaling his resources, preparing to eliminate the threats that Caleb, Ava, and everyone helping them represented. It was going to be a long night, and an even longer day to follow. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of October morning that promised winter wasn't far behind. Caleb had been awake for hours, watching the forest lighten degree by degree when he heard Riley's door open. She emerged, rubbing sleep from her eyes, still clutching her rabbit, and found her father sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by disassembled firearms and tactical gear. She stopped in the doorway, taking it all in with that unnerving calm that sometimes made Caleb wonder if she understood far more than any 8-year-old should. You didn't sleep, Riley said. Not a question. Couldn't. Caleb set down the pistol he'd been field stripping and held out his arms. She came to him immediately, climbing into his lap like she'd done since she was small enough to fit in the crook of one arm. How'd you sleep, baby? I had a dream about Mom. Riley's voice was soft, almost wondering. She said you were going to be okay, that I shouldn't worry. Caleb's throat closed up. He held his daughter tighter, breathing in the apple shampoo smell of her hair, trying to memorize this moment in case it was one of the last peaceful ones they'd have. Your mom always knew how to make people feel better. She was brave, right? That's what you always say? The bravest person I ever knew. Riley was quiet for a moment, her small fingers tracing the edge of his watch, Jessica's watch, actually, the tactical Suunto she'd worn on her last mission. Caleb had worn it every day since her death, a reminder of what he'd lost and why he'd chosen peace over violence. Until yesterday, when violence had chosen him instead. I have to be brave too, don't I? Riley looked up at him with those two old eyes. That's why you're sending me away. Caleb hadn't planned to have this conversation until after breakfast, until after he'd figured out the right words. But Riley had always had a way of forcing truth into the open. Yeah, baby, you're going to Montana for a little while. Cross it. Remember Sarah? The woman I served with, the one with the ranch and all those horses you liked in the pictures? I remember. Riley's voice had gone small. How long is a little while? I don't know yet. A few days, maybe a week. He tilted her chin up, made sure she was looking at him. But Riley, I need you to understand something. This isn't because I don't want you with me. It's because keeping you safe is the most important thing in the world to me. And right now, safe means far away from here. Because of the bad men. Because of the bad men, Caleb agreed. The things I have to do to stop them. You can't be anywhere near that. It's not about you being weak or scared. It's about me needing to know you're okay so I can focus on what needs to happen next. Riley processed this with her characteristic seriousness, and Caleb could practically see her working through the logic, testing it for holes. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but you have to promise again. You'll come get me when it's over. I promise. The lie tasted like ash, but he said it anyway because sometimes love meant lying to the people you'd die to protect. And Riley, when this is done, when everything's settled, maybe we'll go somewhere new, start fresh. Would you like that? Will Ava come with us? The question caught him off guard. I don't know, baby. Why do you ask? Because she's sad like you're sad, like she lost something important and can't remember where she put it. Riley's perception was, as always, startlingly accurate. And I think maybe if you help her find what she lost, she won't be sad anymore, and neither will you. Before Caleb could formulate a response to that particular piece of 8-year-old wisdom, the sound of vehicles approaching cut through the morning quiet. He was on his feet instantly, Riley scooped up and deposited in the back room with instructions to stay put, his hand already on the pistol at his hip. But it was just the team arriving. 8 men in 4 vehicles pulling up to the cabin with the casual precision of people who'd done 1,000 tactical insertions and knew how to make an approach look unthreatening. Caleb recognized every face, brothers in arms from his SEAL days, guys who'd bled with him in a dozen countries whose names were still classified. Hernandez came first, looking exactly the same as he had 6 years ago, except for the gray threading through his black hair. Behind him came Chen, Rodriguez, Williams, Patterson, Burke, Foster, and bringing up the rear, limping slightly from an old wound, Thompson. They gathered in the cabin's main room, filling the small space with their presence. 8 men who'd learned to be dangerous and then tried to learn how to be normal again. The transition hadn't been easy for any of them. Caleb could see it in their eyes, in the way they moved, in the careful way they didn't look too long at the weapons spread across his table. Ghost 7. Hernandez clasped Caleb's hand, pulled him into a brief embrace. Didn't think I'd ever hear that call sign again. Didn't think I'd ever use it. Caleb stepped back, let his eyes travel across the assembled group. Thanks for coming. I know what I'm asking. You're asking us to finish what we started in Afghanistan. Chen's voice was quiet but fierce. You're asking us to make Vance pay for what he did to our brothers, to your wife. We've been waiting 6 years for someone to give us that chance. It's not going to be clean, Caleb warned. Vance has resources we can't match, connections that go deeper than we can dig. This operation has maybe a 40% chance of success, and that's being optimistic. 60% chance of failure. Williams, the team's former demolitions expert, grinned without humor. Hell, I've taken worse odds on a Tuesday. There's more. Caleb gestured for Ava to join them. She'd been standing in the kitchen doorway, observing but not intruding, and now she moved into the room with the kind of coiled tension that spoke to training she didn't consciously remember. This is Ava Kensington. She's the reason Vance is moving now, the reason he sent contractors to my shop, and she's the key to taking him down. Ava stood before 8 of the most dangerous men in America and met their assessing gazes without flinching. 7 years ago, Chief Petty Officer Mercer pulled me out of a Syrian black site. I don't remember it. They made sure of that. but apparently I owe him my life. Now he's trying to save it again. And I'm trying to make sure this time we end the threat permanently. The AI project, Rodriguez said. He'd always been the smart one, the guy who read intelligence briefings for fun and could quote Sun Tzu from memory. We heard rumors. Military-grade predictive algorithms, autonomous targeting systems, the kind of thing that makes Skynet look like a calculator. Worse than that. Ava's voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. Helix was designed to identify and eliminate domestic threats before they could act. Political dissidents, whistleblowers, journalists asking the wrong questions. Vance wants to build a system where the government can kill its own citizens based on what an algorithm thinks they might do. The silence that followed was profound. These were men who'd sworn an oath to defend the Constitution, who'd fought and bled and watched their brothers die for the idea that America stood for something better than preemptive murder and political assassination. Son of a bitch, Thompson spoke for all of them, his voice thick with disgust. He's building a domestic kill list. And using my company to do it, Ava continued, using me, because I built the prototype years ago when I was an operative, before they wiped my memory and turned me into a useful idiot who'd recreate her own worst nightmare. So we stop him. Patterson, always the most direct member of the team, looked at Caleb. What's the plan? Caleb moved to the table, unfolded a map of the eastern seaboard that he'd marked up overnight with routes and targets and contingencies. Ava has proof. 3 encrypted drives containing everything we need to expose Vance and everyone working with him. The drives are hidden in 3 locations: Manhattan, Vermont, and Boston. We split into 3 teams, hit all 3 sites simultaneously at 0900 hours. Coordinated assault, Chen nodded approvingly. Forces him to split his resources, respond to multiple threats at once. Exactly. Team 1, Hernandez, Chen, Rodriguez, you take Manhattan, safety deposit box at First National Bank, Midtown. Ava has the access codes and authentication. Get in, get the drive, get out. Expect heavy resistance. Vance will have people watching that bank. Team 2, Williams, Patterson, Burke. You're on Vermont. Small town cemetery, low profile, but don't underestimate the opposition. Vance knows about the gravesite. He'll have contractors in place. And Team 3? Foster asked. Me, Ava, Thompson, and you. We hit Boston, Kensington Tech headquarters, server room on the 10th floor. It's going to be the hardest target, most security, most civilians, highest chance of collateral damage. But it's also where the most complete version of the data is stored. Marcus, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. And while all this is happening, you stay here with Riley until my contact arrives to take her to Montana. Then you're our command and control. Monitor police bands, track news coverage, coordinate between teams. Caleb met his old friend's eyes. And if everything goes to hell, you make sure those automated leaks go live. No matter what happens to us, the truth gets out. What about extraction? Thompson's question was pointed. We get the drives, we get clear. Then what? Vance isn't going to just let us walk away. We don't walk away. We go public immediately. Ava's voice was hard. The second we have all 3 drives, we don't wait. We don't hide. We don't try to negotiate. We dump everything to every media outlet simultaneously, make it so loud and so public that Vance can't make it disappear. And if he tries anyway? Burke asked. If he decides dead whistleblowers are better than live ones? Then we already have insurance policies in place. Caleb tapped his phone. Automated releases, multiple redundancies, dead man switches. Even if he kills every person in this room, the information still goes public. We're not trying to survive this, gentlemen. We're trying to make our deaths mean something. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a shroud. These were men who'd faced death before, who'd made peace with mortality in 100 different firefights. But facing it for their country was different than facing it for revenge and justice and the slim hope that maybe their sacrifice would change something. Riley's small voice cut through the heavy silence. You're not going to die. Every head turned. She stood in the doorway to the back room, still holding her rabbit, her expression fierce and certain. Caleb's heart clenched. Baby, I told you to stay. You're not going to die, Riley repeated, louder this time. Because you promised, and you never break your promises. Caleb crossed the room in 3 strides. knelt in front of his daughter, and took her small face in his hands. "You're right. I promised. And I'm going to do everything I can to keep that promise." "Not everything." Riley's voice was steady, but tears tracked down her cheeks. "You're going to do whatever it takes. Mom told me. In my dream. She said you'd do whatever it takes to come home, and I should believe you." The men behind Caleb had gone very quiet, witnessing something private and profound and painful in the exchange between father and daughter. "Whatever it takes," Caleb agreed softly. "Now I need you to do something for me. I need you to be brave like your mom was brave. Can you do that?" Riley nodded, swiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "I can do that." "Good girl." He kissed her forehead, held her tight for one long moment, then forced himself to let go and stand up. "Marcus? How long until your contact arrives?" 20 minutes. She's flying in from Billings, landing at the county airstrip." "Then we've got 20 minutes to go over the plan one more time. Make sure everyone knows their part." Caleb returned to the table, to the map and the weapons and the tactical gear that represented his return to the life he'd tried to escape. "After that, we move. No delays, no second guessing. We hit Vance hard and fast, and we don't stop until he's finished." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of logistics and contingencies, of checking weapons and reviewing extraction routes, and making sure everyone understood that this wasn't a normal operation with normal rules of engagement. They were going up against a private military contractor with effectively unlimited resources, and the only advantage they had was surprise and righteous fury. It would have to be enough. Sarah Whitmore arrived exactly on schedule, landing her small Cessna with the casual competence of someone who'd flown combat insertions in Iraq and now used those skills to shuttle supplies to her Montana ranch. She was in her early 40s, lean and weathered, with the kind of presence that made people instinctively trust her. "Ghost 7, she clasped Caleb's hand firmly. "Been a long time." "Too long, thanks for doing this. You saved my life in Fallujah. I owe you more than babysitting duty." Sarah's eyes found Riley, and her expression softened. "You must be Riley. Your dad's told me a lot about you." "He says you have horses." Riley's voice was small, uncertain in the way children got when they were trying very hard to be brave. 12 of them, and 6 dogs, 4 cats, and more chickens than I can count." Sarah held out her hand. "Want to come meet them?" Riley looked back at her father, and Caleb saw the question in her eyes. The fear. The desperate hope that maybe this was all a mistake. Maybe they could just go home and pretend yesterday never happened. But yesterday had happened, and there was no going home. "Go on, baby." Caleb kept his voice steady through sheer force of will. "I'll see you real soon." Riley crossed the room, took Sarah's hand, and then broke away to throw herself at her father one last time. Caleb caught her, held her like he'd done when she was a baby, and the whole world could fit in his arms. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "More than anything in the whole world, don't ever forget that." "I love you too, Daddy." Riley's voice was muffled against his chest. "Come back. You have to come back." "I will. I promise." Then Sarah was leading her away, talking about horses and open skies and all the things Montana had that Pennsylvania didn't, and Riley was walking toward the plane without looking back because looking back would make it too hard to leave. Caleb watched until the Cessna was airborne, until it was a small speck against the gray sky, until it disappeared completely beyond the tree line. Only then did he allow himself to turn away, to face the men who would follow him into whatever hell waited in the hours ahead. "Let's move," he said, and his voice was ice. "We've got a war to finish." They loaded into vehicles, 3 teams, 3 targets, 3 simultaneous strikes against an enemy who'd operated above the law for too long. Caleb rode with Foster, Thompson, and Ava, heading east toward Boston while the other teams split off toward their respective objectives. The drive was tense and quiet. Ava sat in the back seat scrolling through her phone, pulling up schematics of her own company's security systems with the detached efficiency of someone planning a heist. Thompson rode shotgun, checking and rechecking his gear with the methodical precision of a man who'd survived a dozen firefights by being prepared for everything. Foster drove, his eyes constantly scanning mirrors and side roads, tracking threats that probably weren't there yet, but definitely would be soon. And Caleb sat in the passenger seat, his mind already at the target, wargaming scenarios and contingencies, and all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. "Talk to me about the security," he said to Ava. "What are we walking into?" "Standard corporate setup on the ground floor, metal detectors, badge readers, security guards who are mostly there to look intimidating. But the server room is different." Ava's voice was clinical, professional. Biometric locks, reinforced doors, dedicated security team. Only 5 people in the company have access, and I'm one of them. Vance will have anticipated that. He'll have people inside, waiting. Probably. But he won't have anticipated us coming in loud. Ava's smile was sharp. He thinks I'm running, trying to hide, going to ground. He doesn't know I've got a team of pissed-off SEALs backing my play. 8 pissed-off SEALs, Thompson corrected, and 1 very angry CEO with a score to settle. That's not a team, ma'am. That's a reckoning. The closer they got to Boston, the more Caleb felt the familiar pre-mission sensation, time slowing down, senses sharpening, his mind clicking into combat mode like a weapon being loaded. He'd missed this, he realized with some surprise. Not the violence itself, but the clarity, the absolute focus that came from knowing exactly what needed to be done and having the skills to do it. For 6 years, he'd been Caleb the mechanic, Caleb the father, Caleb the man trying to be normal. But normal had never fit quite right, like a jacket that was slightly too small, restrictive, and uncomfortable. This, though, this felt right. His phone buzzed with a text from Hernandez. Team 1 was in position in Manhattan, waiting for the go signal. A minute later, Williams confirmed Team 2 had eyes on the Vermont cemetery. "We're 5 minutes out," Foster announced. "Everyone clear on the plan?" "Clear," Thompson said. Ava nodded. "I get us to the server room, you 3 handle security, we grab the drive and exfiltrate before police response arrives. Simple." "Nothing's ever simple," Caleb said. But he was checking his gear as he said it. Pistol loaded and chambered, spare magazine secured, tactical vest tight and positioned correctly. "But it's a good plan. Foster, drop us at the north entrance. Less foot traffic, easier to control. Thompson, you're on point. Ava stays between us. I've got rear security. And if we make contact, neutralize and move. No unnecessary casualties, but we're not leaving witnesses who can slow us down." Caleb's voice was hard. "Vance's contractors are fair game. Anyone else, we try to avoid engagement. But gentlemen, we're not getting caught. We're not getting stopped. We get that drive and we get out, no matter what it takes." Foster pulled into the parking garage of a building 3 blocks from Kensington Tech headquarters. They moved fast, but not frantically. 4 people who could have been business professionals except for the weapons concealed under jackets, and the way they moved with perfect tactical spacing. The morning streets were busy with commuters and delivery trucks and all the ordinary chaos of a city coming to life. No one looked twice at them. Caleb had learned a long time ago that the best way to hide was in plain sight, to move with such confidence that people's eyes just slid right past you. They approached the building, a glass and steel tower that probably cost more than Caleb would earn in 10 lifetimes, and Ava didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the security desk, smiled at the guard with the easy charm of someone who owned the building. "Morning, James. How's your daughter doing? Still loving college?" The guard's face lit up. "Ms. Kensington, she's doing great. Thanks for asking. Made the dean's list last semester." "That's wonderful. I'm proud of her." Ava's warmth seemed completely genuine, and maybe it was. Just because her identity was constructed didn't mean her feelings were fake. "These gentlemen are with me, security consultants. We're doing an assessment of our server room protocols." "Of course, ma'am." James barely glanced at Caleb and the others, waving them through. "Have a good day." Just like that, they were inside. "Smooth," Thompson murmured as they crossed the lobby toward the elevators. "I've been playing this role for 7 years. Ava hit the call button, long enough that I can do it in my sleep. The elevator arrived empty. They stepped inside, and Ava swiped her badge, pressed the button for the 10th floor. As the doors closed and the car began to rise, Caleb felt his pulse settling into the slow, steady rhythm he'd learned in combat. Fear was natural. Panic was deadly. The key was staying between the two, letting adrenaline sharpen his senses without clouding his judgment. "Cameras?" he asked. "Everywhere, But I control the security system, already looped the feeds. As far as building security knows, these hallways are empty. Ava's fingers moved across her phone's screen, accessing systems with the quick efficiency of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. We've got maybe 10 minutes before someone notices the anomaly and sends a patrol to check. The elevator chimed. 10th floor. The doors opened onto a corridor that looked like every other corporate hallway. Neutral carpet, blank walls, fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly unreal. But Caleb could feel the difference. This was restricted space. Secure. Protected. Dangerous. Contact, Thompson said softly. Two men in suits standing outside the server room door. They had the build and bearing of military contractors trying to pass as corporate security, but their eyes gave them away. Hard eyes, watchful eyes, eyes that had seen violence and were prepared to deliver it. They saw Ava and their hands move toward weapons concealed under expensive jackets. Caleb was faster. He moved like water, smooth and inevitable, closing the distance before the first contractor could draw his pistol. His hand locked around the man's wrist, twisted, and the weapon clattered to the floor. Caleb's elbow caught him in the solar plexus, drove the air from his lungs, and he dropped without a sound. Thompson took the second contractor with similar efficiency, a quick combination of strikes that left the man unconscious on the carpet. The entire engagement lasted maybe 4 seconds, over before it really began. "Clock's running," Caleb said, dragging the unconscious contractors into a nearby conference room and zip-tying their hands behind their backs. "Ava, the door." She moved to the server room entrance, pressed her hand against the biometric scanner. It beeped, flashed green, and the heavy door swung open on silent hinges. The room beyond was exactly what Caleb expected. Rows of server racks humming with quiet power, the air kept artificially cool, cables running like veins through the technological heart of Ava's company. Somewhere in this maze of hardware and data was the proof they needed. "Third rack from the left, middle shelf," Ava said, moving with purpose. "The drive is hidden inside a dummy server casing. Looks like part of the regular equipment, but it's actually a standalone unit." She reached the rack, opened the casing with hands that barely trembled, and pulled out a device no bigger than a deck of cards. Such a small thing, Caleb thought. Such a small thing to contain so much destruction. "Got it." Ava held up the drive like a trophy. "Now The explosion came from somewhere below them, a deep concussive boom that shook the entire building. The lights flickered. Emergency alarms started screaming. "That's not us," Foster said. "No." But Caleb's mind was already racing through possibilities. "That's Vance. He's not trying to stop us. He's trying to destroy the evidence. Thompson, Foster, we need to move now." They ran for the elevator, but the doors were locked down by the building's emergency protocols. The stairs, then. Caleb hit the stairwell door at a dead run, the others right behind him, and they pounded down the concrete steps while somewhere below them another explosion rocked the building. "He's going to bring the whole tower down," Ava gasped. "He's going to kill everyone in this building just to make sure we don't get out with that drive." "We're getting out." Caleb's voice was absolute certainty built on nothing but will. "Keep moving." They burst out onto the 8th floor just as a third explosion tore through the levels below. The floor beneath Caleb's feet shifted sickeningly, and he knew with cold clarity that Vance had placed charges in the building's support structure. This wasn't just about destroying evidence. This was about sending a message. "No one crosses me and lives." "Fire escape," Caleb shouted over the alarms. "East side of the building." They crashed through an office suite, scattering shocked employees who were already evacuating. The fire escape was old steel, rusted, and probably not up to code, but it would hold. It had to hold. Caleb went first, testing the structure, then waved the others through. They descended in controlled chaos, floor by floor, while police sirens wailed in the distance and smoke began pouring from the lower levels. They were 3 floors from the ground when Caleb heard the distinctive crack of gunfire. Someone was shooting at them from another building. Not random chaos, targeted fire from a professional sniper trying to slow them down. "Down! Now!" Caleb threw himself against the building's wall, pulling Ava with him. A bullet sparked off the fire escape's railing where her head had been a second before. Thompson returned fire without hesitation, his pistol barking 3 quick shots toward the sniper's position. not expecting to hit anything at this range, just making the shooter think twice about exposing himself for another shot. "Go!" Thompson shouted. "I'll cover." They went. Down the last 3 floors at a pace that was barely controlled, falling, hitting the ground running as the building groaned and shuddered above them. People were streaming out of the main entrance, a panicked mob that provided perfect cover for 4 more people trying to blend in and disappear. Caleb's phone buzzed. Marcus, calling from the cabin. He answered while running, Foster and Ava flanking him, Thompson bringing up the rear. "We're seeing news reports," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Boston PD is calling it a terrorist attack. Multiple explosions, possible building collapse. Please tell me you're not in that building." "We got out. We have the drive." Caleb dodged around a stopped car, its driver staring up at the smoking tower in shock. "What about the other teams?" "Hernandez called in 30 seconds ago. They have the Manhattan Drive, light casualties. Williams is still radio silent from Vermont. Keep trying to reach them. We're heading to the rally point." Caleb had picked a warehouse in South Boston as their contingency meeting location, neutral ground, easy to defend, multiple exit routes. "We go public as soon as all teams confirm they have their packages." Another explosion, this one so loud it felt like a physical force. Caleb risked a glance back and saw the Kensington Tech Tower's upper floors beginning to collapse in on themselves, pancaking down in a controlled demolition that Vance must have spent days planning. How many people were still inside? How many innocent employees who'd had nothing to do with Helix or classified research or any of this would die because they'd been in the wrong building at the wrong time? "He's a monster," Ava breathed, watching her company, her life's work, turning to rubble and flame. "He's actually a monster." "Yeah," Caleb's voice was flat. "That's why we're going to stop him." They reached Foster's vehicle and piled in, pulling away just as the first police cars arrived. The city was chaos, emergency vehicles screaming past, civilians filming the disaster on their phones, news helicopters already circling overhead. Perfect cover for 4 people who needed to disappear. Caleb's phone rang again. This time it was Hernandez. "Ghost, we've got a problem. Vermont team isn't responding. Last check-in was 20 minutes ago. They were about to enter the cemetery when..." Static filled the line, then cleared. "When they spotted at least a dozen hostiles moving into position, I think they walked into an ambush." Caleb's blood went cold. Williams, Patterson, Burke. 3 good men who'd come out of retirement because he'd asked them to. 3 men with families, with lives they'd built after leaving the violence behind. 3 men who might be dead because Caleb had underestimated how ruthless Vance would be. "We need to help them," Ava said, reading his expression. "We're 200 miles away." Thompson's voice was heavy. "Even if we left right now, we'd never get there in time." "Then we call it in. Get local PD involved." Foster was already pulling up maps on his phone, calculating routes and response times. "No." Caleb's mind was working through the tactical picture, seeing the trap for what it was. "That's what Vance wants. He wants us scattered, responding to crises, trying to save our people while he moves in for the kill. We stay focused. We get to the rally point, we secure the drives we have, and we go public. That's how we save Williams and the others, by making their sacrifice mean something." "Cold," Ava observed. "Necessary." Caleb's jaw was tight. "You think I want to leave them out there? They're my brothers. But if we break formation now, if we let Vance dictate our movements, we lose. And if we lose, everyone dies. Williams, Patterson, Burke, they knew the risks. They signed up anyway. Best way to honor that is to finish the mission." The warehouse appeared ahead, a squat brick building in an industrial area that had seen better decades. Foster pulled around back, out of sight from the street, and they exited the vehicle with weapons drawn. The warehouse was supposed to be empty, supposed to be safe. Instead, they found Hernandez, Chen, and Rodriguez surrounded by a dozen armed contractors, hands raised, weapons on the ground at their feet, and standing in the center of the warehouse, smiling like a man who'd just won a particularly satisfying game, was Colonel Rowan Vance himself. "Chief Petty Officer Mercer," Vance said, his voice rich with false warmth. "It's been a long time. I was wondering when you'd finally work up the courage to come after me." Caleb's world narrowed to a single point of focus. The man standing in the center of the warehouse looked exactly as he remembered from 6 years ago. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of face that inspired confidence in boardrooms and congressional hearings. Colonel Rowan Vance wore an expensive suit instead of his uniform now, but the authority in his posture hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown sharper, more certain, untempered by military oversight or constitutional constraints. "Don't move." Vance's voice remained conversational, almost friendly, but a dozen laser sights painted red dots across Caleb's chest. "I'd hate for this reunion to end prematurely." Caleb's hand hovered near his pistol, calculating angles and odds. Thompson and Foster had frozen beside him, reading the tactical situation with the same combat-honed instincts. 12 contractor tractors, all with clear fields of fire. Hernandez and his team disarmed and vulnerable, and Vance standing in the kill zone like a man who'd never doubted his own invincibility. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic," Caleb said, keeping his voice level. "Setting traps, staging ambushes. How long have you been planning this particular tableau?" "Since the moment Ms. Kensington here decided to develop a conscience." Vance's eyes slid to Ava, and his smile turned predatory. "Though I suppose I should call you by your real name. Do you remember it yet, Agent Petrov, or are the conditioning protocols still holding?" Ava went rigid beside Caleb. "My name is Ava Kensington." "Your name is whatever I programmed it to be." Vance took a step forward, hands clasped behind his back like a professor delivering a lecture. "You were Sophia Petrov once, a brilliant young operative who got too close to secrets that weren't meant for her. We extracted you, rebuilt you, and pointed you at exactly the project we needed completed. You played your role perfectly, until you didn't." "You made me build a weapon!" Ava's voice shook with rage. "You turned me into a tool to destroy the very freedoms I once fought to protect." "I turned you into something useful. There's a difference." Vance's tone suggested he genuinely believed this, that in his mind he'd done her a favor. "The world is changing, Agent Petrov. Democracy is a beautiful idea, but it's also slow and chaotic and vulnerable. What we needed was order, control, the ability to identify and eliminate threats before they could metastasize. Helix was the answer." "Helix is a murder machine," Caleb cut in, "a system designed to kill American citizens based on algorithmic predictions. That's not order, that's tyranny. That's evolution." Vance's expression didn't change. "And you, Chief Mercer, are standing in its way. You've been a problem for 6 years. A loose end I should have tied up in Afghanistan. But I thought time and grief would keep you quiet. Thought you'd be content playing at being normal, raising your daughter, fixing cars." His smile was a knife. "I underestimated your capacity for vengeance. You murdered my wife." The words came out flat, emotionless, but Caleb could feel the old rage burning beneath his skin like acid. "You sent us into that convoy knowing it was compromised, knowing we'd be hit. 4 civilians and 3 operators died because you needed to protect a weapons contract. I made a difficult choice." Vance's voice remained steady, untroubled by guilt or doubt. "Those contractors' lives against a $500 million deal that would fund operations saving hundreds of American soldiers. The math was simple." "The math!" Caleb repeated the words like they tasted rotten. "My wife was pregnant. Did your math account for that?" The warehouse went silent. Even the contractors shifted uncomfortably, suddenly looking anywhere but at Caleb's face. Vance's expression finally flickered, not with shame, but with mild irritation at an unexpected variable. "I didn't know that." "She didn't either. Not until 2 days before the mission. She was going to tell me when we got back stateside." Caleb's voice had gone very quiet, very dangerous. "So when your contact-initiated explosive tore through our convoy, you didn't just kill Jessica. You killed our son." Ava made a soft sound of horror. Hernandez, still standing with his hands raised, closed his eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss," Vance said, and incredibly, he sounded sincere. "But it doesn't change the calculus. Your family's tragedy was unfortunate, but the work continues. It has to continue." "Not anymore." Caleb's hand moved toward his weapon, slow and deliberate. "I'm taking you down, Vance, today, right now, and nothing you say is going to change that." "I'm aware." Vance gestured casually, and the contractor's weapons tracked to follow Caleb's movement, which is why I've taken precautions. You have something I need. 3 encrypted drives containing data you think will destroy me. What you don't know is that I have something you need. He nodded to one of the contractors, who pressed a button on his phone. A screen descended from the warehouse ceiling, flickering to life with a video feed. Riley. She sat in what looked like a concrete room, still clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide and frightened but dry. No tears. His brave girl refusing to cry even though she had to be terrified. Caleb's entire world inverted. You son of a... She's unharmed. Vance spoke over him, calm and absolute. Fed, watered, comfortable. My people intercepted the plane before it reached Montana. Your friend Sarah put up quite a fight, but ultimately she's just one woman against a professional extraction team. Your daughter is safe, Chief Mercer. She stays safe as long as you give me those drives. The rage that filled Caleb was unlike anything he'd experienced. Losing Jessica had broken him, but threatening Riley, actually taking his daughter, putting her in a cage, using her as leverage, that went beyond breaking. That was annihilation of everything he'd tried to build from the ruins of his old life. If you hurt her, Caleb's voice was barely human. I won't. You have my word. Vance's expression was almost sympathetic. I'm not a monster, despite what you think. Children are off limits, always have been. But I need those drives, and you need your daughter, so we make a trade. Simple as that. You think I believe anything you say? Caleb took a step forward, and a dozen weapons trained on him with lethal precision. You think I trust the man who killed my wife and unborn child to keep his word about my daughter? You don't have a choice. Vance's voice hardened. You can refuse, you can fight, you can die here in this warehouse. But if those drives aren't in my possession within the hour, your daughter disappears into a system so deep and black that you'll never find her. She'll grow up in foster care under a different name, never knowing what happened to her father, never understanding why he abandoned her. Is that really what Jessica would have wanted? The invocation of his dead wife's name from this man's mouth nearly sent Caleb over the edge into violence that would get everyone killed. But through the red haze of rage, cold tactical thinking reasserted itself. Vance wasn't bluffing. He had Riley. He had the advantage, and dying here in a futile firefight wouldn't save his daughter. How do I know she's really alive? Caleb forced the words through clenched teeth. That feed could be recorded. She could already be dead. Vance nodded to the contractor with the phone again. The video feed shifted, became a live two-way connection. Riley's face filled the screen and Caleb heard her gasp. Daddy? I'm here, baby. Caleb stepped closer to the screen, needing her to see him, to know he was coming. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm scared. Riley's voice cracked, but she kept her composure with that devastating bravery she'd inherited from her mother. The bad men took me off the plane. Sarah tried to stop them, but there were too many. She told me to be brave, to trust that you'd find me. I will find you, I promise. Caleb looked past his daughter's face, trying to identify anything in the background that might indicate her location. Concrete walls, no windows, industrial lighting, could be anywhere. Just hold on a little longer, okay? Enough. Vance gestured, and the screen went dark. You've confirmed she's alive. Now let's discuss terms. The 3 drives in exchange for your daughter's location. You have 1 hour to retrieve the other 2 drives from your teammates. Once I have all 3, I'll tell you where she is. And then you'll kill us all anyway. Ava's voice was bitter. You can't let us live. We know too much. Perhaps, Vance conceded the point with a slight shrug. But you'll be alive long enough to save the girl. That's something. More than most people in your position would get. Caleb looked at Hernandez, at Chen, and Rodriguez still standing with hands raised, at Thompson and Foster beside him. His team, his brothers, men who'd followed him into this disaster and would follow him into whatever came next. Then he looked at Ava, seeing his own rage and helplessness reflected in her eyes. They'd come so close. 2 drives secured, 1 team still fighting in Vermont, and victory had seemed almost possible. But Vance had done what Vance always did. He'd found the pressure point, the weakness, the one thing Caleb couldn't sacrifice no matter what the tactical situation demanded. He'd weaponized Riley against her own father. How do we do this? Caleb asked, hating every word. Smart man. Vance actually smiled like Caleb had passed some kind of test. You and Miss Kensington will retrieve the Vermont drive personally. I'm sending a team with you to ensure compliance. Once all 3 drives are in my possession and verified authentic, I'll release your daughter's location. How do I know you'll actually do that? You don't. Vance's honesty was almost refreshing in its cruelty. But it's the only chance you have, so you'll take it. Caleb's mind raced through options, all of them bad. Fight now and watch Riley disappear forever. Surrender the drives and hope Vance kept his word despite having no reason to. Run and spend the rest of Riley's childhood looking over their shoulders, never safe, never free. Or find a 4th option, something Vance hadn't anticipated, something that turned his own trap against him. I'll need to contact the Vermont team, Caleb said. Make sure they're still operational. Of course. Vance gestured magnanimously. Though I should mention that my people engaged them approximately 30 minutes ago. Last report indicated casualties on both sides. Whether your friends are still alive? He trailed off with a shrug. Williams, Patterson, Burke. 3 more names added to the butcher's bill Vance had been running for years. 3 more reasons this man needed to be stopped, regardless of cost. But not at the cost of Riley. Never at the cost of Riley. Let me talk to my team, Caleb said. Figure out our logistics. You've got me, Vance. You've got all of us. Just give me 10 minutes to coordinate. Vance considered this, then nodded. 10 minutes. But my people stay close. And Chief Mercer? Don't try anything heroic. You're not in a position to be a hero anymore. You're just a father trying to save his daughter. Remember that. The contractors pulled back slightly, giving Caleb's group space but keeping weapons trained and ready. Caleb moved close to his team, pitching his voice low enough that Vance's men wouldn't overhear. This is bad, Hernandez said quietly. He's got us boxed in. I know. Caleb's mind was working furiously, pieces of a plan starting to come together. Marcus is still free, still has access to our dead man switches and automated releases. If we can delay Vance long enough, if we can keep him focused on getting those drives while Marcus works the information warfare angle. That's a long shot, Chen interrupted. Vance has your daughter. You really think he's going to let any of us walk away from this? No. Caleb met each man's eyes in turn. I think he's going to try to kill us all once he has what he wants. But I also think he's underestimating us. He thinks having Riley gives him absolute control. He thinks we're defeated. Aren't we? Thompson's question was blunt. We're tactical. Caleb's voice was hard. There's a difference. We give him the drives, yes. We play along, follow his script, but we build in fail-safes he doesn't know about. We coordinate with Marcus. And the second Riley is clear, the second she's safe, we take him apart, Foster finished. Piece by piece. Caleb looked at Ava. Your company's data, the drives. How long would it take someone with technical expertise to verify they're authentic? At least an hour, maybe 2 if they're being thorough. Ava's eyes narrowed as she followed his logic. You want to give him the drives, but make him think he needs to verify them before letting Riley go. I want to buy time. Time for Marcus to move our information to places Vance can't reach. Time for our story to start leaking through channels he can't control. Time to turn his victory into the thing that destroys him. Caleb pulled out his phone, started composing a message to Marcus with his back turned to block Vance's line of sight. He's got Riley, but we've got the truth. And if I've learned anything in 6 years of being a father, it's that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. That's from a Disney movie, Rodriguez said. Doesn't make it less true. Caleb hit send on the message, then turned back to face Vance. We'll do it. We'll get your drives. But I want proof of life every hour. I want to see my daughter, talk to her, confirm she's okay. That's non-negotiable. Vance appeared to consider this, then nodded. Acceptable. I'm not a monster, Chief Mercer. I gain nothing from harming a child. You're sending armed men to ensure my compliance while you hold my daughter hostage, Caleb said flatly. You crossed into monster territory the moment you involved Riley. Perspective. Vance smiled that infuriating smile. What you call monstrous, I call effective. Now, shall we get moving? Your daughter's waiting, and I'm not a patient man. The ride to Vermont happened in a haze of barely controlled violence. Caleb, Ava, Thompson, and Foster were loaded into one of Vance's vehicles, a luxury SUV with bulletproof glass and contractors in the front seats. Hernandez and the others were held at the warehouse under guard, insurance against Caleb trying anything unexpected. They drove in silence through the afternoon, heading north through Massachusetts and into Vermont's autumn landscape. The trees were burning with color, brilliant reds and golds against the gray sky, beautiful and oblivious to the human drama playing out beneath their branches. Caleb used the drive to think, to plan, to communicate with Marcus through carefully coded text messages that looked like nothing more than a father checking in on his daughter's welfare. Marcus was moving fast, distributing copies of their evidence to journalists, activists, and congressional staffers through encrypted channels. The information wasn't public yet, but it was spreading, becoming harder to contain with each passing hour. Time, Caleb thought. Just buy enough time for the dam to break. They reached the cemetery outside of Rutland just as the sun was setting, painting long shadows across weathered headstones and fall-brown grass. The place looked peaceful, pastoral, the kind of small-town graveyard where generations of the same families were buried together. It looked nothing like a battlefield. But the burned-out shell of a vehicle near the entrance told a different story, as did the blood on the grass, the bullet casings scattered like seeds, the way the contractors approaching the site moved with weapons ready and eyes scanning for threats. "Your friends put up quite a fight," one of Vance's men said with something almost like respect. "Took out 5 of ours before we finally neutralized them." "Are they alive?" Caleb forced the question through a throat tight with dread. 2 are. The third didn't make it. Caleb closed his eyes briefly, adding another name to the ledger of debts Vance owed. Which one? Williams, who'd made terrible jokes to cover his fear before every mission? Patterson, who'd saved Caleb's life in Fallujah? Burke, who'd retired to teach high school history and coach football? It didn't matter. One of his brothers was dead. One of the men who'd answered his call, who'd trusted him, who'd believed stopping Vance was worth the risk. "Where are the survivors?" Caleb asked. "Secured. You'll see them after you retrieve the drive." The contractor gestured toward the cemetery. "Your CEO knows which grave. Go get it. And Chief? Don't try anything. We have shooters positioned with clear lines of sight. You so much as sneeze wrong, and we put you down." Ava moved first, walking into the cemetery with her shoulders squared and her head high. Caleb followed, hyper-aware of the weapons tracking their movement, of the tactical positions Vance's men had taken, of how exposed they were in the open ground. "This way," Ava said quietly. She led him through rows of markers until they reached a simple granite headstone that read, "Margaret Kensington, 1945 to 2018, beloved mother." "My mother," Ava said, kneeling beside the grave. "Or the woman they told me was my mother. I have memories of her, birthday parties, bedtime stories, teaching me to ride a bike, but now I don't know if any of it's real or just programming." "It's real to you," Caleb said. "That's what matters." Ava pulled a trowel from her jacket pocket and began digging beside the headstone. The earth came away easily, recently disturbed, and within minutes she'd uncovered a waterproof container. Inside was the second drive, sealed and protected. "Got it," she said, holding it up for the contractors to see. "Good." The lead contractor stepped forward. "Now we—" The shot came from somewhere in the tree line, a sharp crack followed by the wet sound of a bullet finding flesh. The contractor dropped. A hole punched through his throat, blood spraying across the grass. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. The contractors scattered, trying to find cover among the headstones. Caleb grabbed Ava and pulled her down behind a large marble monument as bullets chipped stone and tore through the air where they'd been standing. "What's happening?" Ava gasped. "Someone's attacking Vance's people." Caleb drew his pistol, trying to track the shooters through the chaos. "I don't know who, but right now, they're on our side." The firefight lasted maybe 90 seconds. Intense, brutal, and one-sided. Vance's contractors were professionals, but they'd been caught off guard, positioned for guarding prisoners rather than defending against assault. The attackers, whoever they were, had the advantage of surprise and superior positions. When the shooting stopped, 6 of Vance's men lay dead or dying. The survivors had their hands raised, surrendering to figures emerging from the tree line. Military figures in tactical gear, but not Vance's people. The insignia on their vests identified them as FBI hostage rescue team, and leading them was a woman Caleb recognized from classified briefings years ago, Special Agent Sarah Chen, Counterterrorism Division. "Chief Petty Officer Mercer," she said, approaching with her weapon lowered but ready. "We've been trying to find you for 6 hours." "The FBI?" Caleb struggled to process this unexpected development. "How did you—" "Your friend Marcus." Chen gestured, and Marcus himself emerged from the tree line, looking grim but triumphant. "He contacted us this morning with evidence of a domestic terrorism threat. Took some convincing, but once we verified the information about Project Helix and Colonel Vance's operations, we mobilized every available asset. We've been tracking Vance's movements, intercepting his communications, building a case." "Riley," Caleb grabbed Chen's arm, "Vance has my daughter. He's holding her hostage to force our compliance. If he finds out you're involved, we know about Riley." Chen's expression softened slightly. "We've been tracking her location through cell tower triangulation. She's being held at a private facility outside of Concord, New Hampshire. We have teams moving on that location right now." Hope flared in Caleb's chest, painful and desperate. "She's alive? You're sure?" "We've had eyes on the building for the last hour. She's alive, Chief Mercer, and we're going to get her back." Chen pulled out a tablet, showed him thermal imaging of a building with multiple heat signatures, one small signature in a ground floor room. "That's her. We go in hard and fast, extract her before Vance's people know what's happening." "I'm coming with you." "No." Chen's voice was firm. "You're emotionally compromised. You'd be a liability on the rescue operation. Let my people do their job." "She's my daughter," Caleb's voice cracked. "I'm not sitting on the sidelines while someone else saves her." "You won't be on the sidelines. You're coming with me to take down Vance." Chen's smile was cold. "We've already secured 2 of the drives, Manhattan and here. We know he's after the 3rd one from the Boston server room, except that building collapsed. Vance doesn't know we have copies of everything. He thinks those drives are his last chance to contain the damage." "So we use them as bait," Ava said, understanding dawning. "We let him think he can still win." "Exactly." Chen looked at her with approval. "Ms. Kensington, or should I say Agent Petrov, your conditioning is breaking down. How much do you remember?" "Enough." Ava's voice was hard. "Enough to want to see Vance destroyed." "Then let's give you that chance," Chen gestured, and her team began efficiently zip-tying the surviving contractors. "We have Vance's location. He's at a private estate in the Berkshires, waiting for you to deliver the drives. He doesn't know we're coming. He thinks he's still in control." "Let's show him otherwise," Caleb said. They loaded into FBI vehicles, and Marcus moved to ride with Caleb. "Sorry I couldn't tell you earlier," he said. "But I needed to make contact with the feds without tipping off Vance. The man's got moles everywhere, DOD, CIA, probably even Bureau itself. Had to go through back channels, people I trusted from my agency days." "You did good." Caleb gripped his friend's shoulder. "Is Sarah okay?" "They said Vance's people intercepted the plane." "She's fine. Pissed off, but fine. Took her round in the shoulder, but she managed to get Riley hidden in the plane's cargo hold before they grabbed her. The kidnappers thought they had your daughter, but they actually got a decoy. Sarah's ranch hand's daughter, similar age and appearance. She's safe now, scared but unharmed. Real Riley is with our people, secured and protected." The relief that washed through Caleb was so intense it almost hurt. "She's safe. My daughter is safe. Safe and waiting for her dad to come home." Marcus's expression was serious. "But Caleb, there's something else. Williams didn't make it. Burke and Patterson are critical but stable. And Vance knows we're coming. He's got to. Too much has happened. Too many of his people have gone dark. He's going to be ready." "Good." Caleb checked his weapons with steady hands. "I want him ready. I want him to see it coming. I want him to know exactly who's destroying him and why." The drive to Vance's estate took 2 hours through mountain roads that wound through wilderness as dark and deep as the ocean floor. They traveled in a convoy, FBI vehicles backed by local SWAT, and even a couple of Army Rangers that Chen had somehow pulled in through connections Caleb didn't want to examine too closely. This wasn't a small operation anymore. This was the full weight of federal law enforcement coming down on a man who'd spent years operating in the shadows, believing himself untouchable. The estate appeared through the trees like something from a Gothic novel, a sprawling compound surrounded by walls and gates, and almost certainly enough security measures to qualify as a fortress. Lights blazed from every window. Vehicles were parked in military precision across the grounds. Vance was ready. "We have warrants," Chen said, reviewing her tablet. "Federal terrorism charges, conspiracy, murder, dozens of counts. He's done, Chief Mercer. Whether he surrenders or fights, Colonel Rowan Vance's career is over." "I don't care about his career." Caleb stared at the compound, at the man somewhere inside who'd destroyed his family, who'd threatened his daughter, who'd turned American intelligence capabilities against American citizens. "I care about justice." "You'll get it," Chen keyed her radio. "All teams move into position. We go on my signal. Rules of engagement are clear. We take him alive if possible. But if he or his people present an imminent threat, you are authorized to use lethal force." The teams spread out, surrounding the compound from multiple angles. Snipers took positions on high ground. Breaching teams prepared at the gates. Everything was military precision, overwhelming force, the kind of operation that didn't leave room for escape. And then, before Chen could give the signal, the gates opened. Vance emerged alone, hands raised, walking slowly toward the FBI line. He wore the same expensive suit, still looked like a man attending a business meeting rather than his own arrest. His expression was calm, almost amused. "Special Agent Chen," he called out. "I was wondering when you'd arrive. Shall we handle this like professionals?" "Colonel Vance, you're under arrest," Chen's voice carried across the distance. "Multiple federal charges, including domestic terrorism, conspiracy to commit murder, and violations of constitutional rights. You will come peacefully. Yes, I know the script." Vance stopped 20 feet from the FBI line, close enough to talk, far enough to avoid immediate apprehension. "But perhaps we can make a deal. I have information, names, operations, classified programs that would make even your superiors uncomfortable. Surely that's worth something." "Information in exchange for leniency?" Chen's laugh was harsh. "You really think that's on the table?" "I think everyone has secrets, Agent Chen, even you, even the FBI. I've spent 20 years accumulating leverage. You arrest me, you prosecute me, and all of that leverage goes public. Every dirty operation, every compromised official, every black budget program that violates international law. Is the Bureau really prepared for that level of exposure?" "Yes." The answer came not from Chen, but from Caleb, who stepped forward past the FBI line. "Because the alternative is letting you keep operating, keep killing, keep using people as tools, and throwing them away when they're no longer useful. That ends today, Vance, one way or another." Vance's eyes found Caleb, and something flickered in them. Not fear, but acknowledgement. "Chief Mercer, I suppose I should have expected you wouldn't hide behind the federal agents. You always were more comfortable with direct action. You murdered my wife. You threatened my daughter. You turned one of the best operators I ever worked with into a weapon aimed at her own country." Caleb's voice was steady, cold as winter. "This isn't about direct action. This is about making sure you never hurt anyone else again." Noble sentiment, but ultimately empty. Vance spread his hands. "I'll be arrested, yes, charged with various crimes. But I have resources, Chief Mercer. Lawyers who can tie up courts for years. Political allies who owe me favors. Intelligence we've gathered on judges and prosecutors. At worst, I'll serve a few comfortable years in a minimum security facility and emerge with my reputation intact and my network still functioning." "Not this time." Ava stepped forward to stand beside Caleb. "Because I remember now. I remember everything you did to me, everything you made me do, every person I hurt because of your conditioning, and I'm going to testify. In open court, in front of cameras, the whole world will know what you are." "Testimony from a mentally compromised asset with documented psychological conditioning?" Vance shook his head. "Any competent lawyer will destroy your credibility in minutes. Then we'll bury you with evidence instead of testimony." Chen gestured, and one of her agents brought forward a laptop. In the last 6 hours, we've received data dumps from multiple sources. The Helix Project files, financial records showing illegal payments to government officials, communications proving you ordered the deaths of American citizens, video footage of your facilities where you conduct illegal interrogations, and psychological experimentation. Would you like me to continue? For the first time, Vance's composure cracked slightly. That information is classified. Multiple security levels. There's no way you could have accessed. Marcus isn't the only one who kept backups, Ava said quietly. I suspected you'd try to eliminate me eventually. So I built redundancies you didn't know about. Digital breadcrumbs hidden across multiple servers, timed releases, deadman switches within deadman switches. You taught me to be paranoid, Colonel. I learned that lesson well. Vance's jaw tightened. He looked at the agents surrounding him, at the compound walls he'd built to keep him safe, now transforming into a cage, at the career and life he'd constructed on lies and violence collapsing in real time. I gave my life to protecting this country, he said, and for the first time he sounded almost human, almost vulnerable. Everything I did, every compromise I made, it was for national security, for keeping Americans safe. You keep using that word, Caleb said. Safe. Like it justifies anything, like it erases the bodies. But my wife wasn't safer because you sent her into an ambush. Ava wasn't safer because you erased her identity. Riley wasn't safer because you tried to kidnap her. You didn't make anyone safe, Vance. You just made yourself powerful. Power is safety. Vance's voice hardened again, the momentary vulnerability vanishing. In this world, only the powerful survive. I thought you of all people would understand that, Chief Mercer. You've killed how many people in service to your country? How is what you did in Fallujah or Kandahar different from what I ordered in Afghanistan? I followed legal orders to defend against actual threats. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. You murdered civilians to protect profit margins. There's a difference. Is there? Vance smiled, that infuriating smile that suggested he knew secrets no one else understood. We both followed orders, Chief. We both killed when we were told to kill. The only difference is you feel guilty about it and I don't. That makes me practical, not evil. It makes you a sociopath, Chen interjected. And this conversation is over. Colonel Rowan Vance, you are under arrest. Officers, take him into custody. FBI agents moved forward, and for a moment Caleb thought Vance would actually surrender peacefully. But then the colonel's expression shifted, became something cold and final. I don't think so, Vance said quietly. He pulled a device from his pocket, small, innocuous, probably a phone or radio. But the way every agent suddenly tensed suggested they recognized it for what it was. A detonator. This compound is wired with enough C4 to level everything in a quarter-mile radius, Vance announced calmly. I press this button, and we all go together. A fitting end, don't you think? If I can't have my freedom, at least I can deny you your victory. You'd kill yourself? Chen's voice was tight. That's not the profile. You're too arrogant, too convinced of your own importance. Perhaps. Or perhaps I've simply accepted that some battles can't be won. Vance's thumb hovered over the trigger. So here's what's going to happen. Your people are going to stand down. You're going to let me walk away. And if I see any attempt at pursuit, if I detect even a hint that you're trying to track me, I detonate. Am I clear? The standoff crystallized into a moment of perfect tension. Dozens of weapons trained on a man holding a button that could kill them all. No good options. No clean solutions, just the kind of impossible choice that defined the world Vance had created. Caleb's mind worked through the tactical picture with the cold precision of someone who'd spent years making impossible decisions under fire. Vance stood 20 feet away with his thumb on a detonator connected to enough explosives to turn this entire mountainside into a crater. The FBI agents were frozen in position, weapons trained but useless against a man willing to take everyone with him. And somewhere in the darkness behind them, Riley was waiting for a father who might be about to die, keeping a promise he should never have made. You won't do it, Caleb said, taking a step forward despite Chen's hissed warning. You're too much of a narcissist. Men like you don't write endings where they lose. You always have an exit strategy. Perhaps. Vance's smile remained fixed, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation. Assessment. Or perhaps I've simply accepted that legacy is worth more than survival. If I can't continue my work, at least I can make sure the people who destroyed it pay the price. Your work? Ava's laugh was bitter. She moved to stand beside Caleb, presenting a united front. You mean turning American citizens into targets? Building kill lists based on algorithm predictions? That's not work, Vance. That's tyranny dressed up in patriotic language. It's evolution. Vance's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his controlled facade. Democracy is dying, Agent Petrov. Drowned in social media and partisan tribalism and foreign interference. What I built, what Helix represented, was a way to save it, to identify threats before they could metastasize, to protect the Republic even if that meant making hard choices. By murdering people who hadn't committed crimes yet. Caleb took another step, closing the distance. By deciding who deserved to live based on what they might do. That's not protecting the Republic. That's becoming the very thing we swore to fight against. Spoken like someone who's never had to make strategic decisions. Vance's composure was returning, his voice steadying. You were always a good operator, Chief Mercer. Excellent in the field. But you never understood the bigger picture. Sometimes innocent people die. Sometimes compromises must be made. That's the price of safety. My wife was the price. Caleb's voice had gone very quiet, very dangerous. My unborn son was the price. How many others paid prices they never agreed to for safety, they never received? Fewer than would have died otherwise. Vance actually seemed to believe this, his expression earnest. That convoy in Afghanistan. Yes, I knew the route was compromised, but if I'd canceled the mission, we'd have lost a weapons contract worth $500 million, money that funded operations saving hundreds of American soldiers. The math was simple. 4 contractors and 3 operators against hundreds of lives saved. What would you have chosen? I would have chosen not to send people into a kill zone with bad intel. Caleb was close now, close enough to see the sweat beading on Vance's forehead despite the cool mountain air. I would have chosen honesty over expedience. I would have chosen to be a man instead of a monster. Easy words from someone who's never carried the weight of command. Vance's thumb pressed fractionally harder on the trigger, and Caleb could see the agents behind him tensing, preparing for the explosion that would end all of them. Stand down, Chief Mercer. Last warning. Another step, and I press this button. No, you won't. The voice came from behind Vance, from the compound's open gate, and it carried the flat certainty of someone who just won a game Vance didn't know he was playing. Marcus emerged from the shadows, and he wasn't alone. With him was a woman in her 60s wearing business attire and an expression of absolute authority. Caleb recognized her from classified briefings, Director Helen Morrison, head of the FBI's National Security Branch, and one of the few people in Washington with enough power and integrity to be genuinely feared. Colonel Vance! Morrison's voice could have cut glass. That detonator in your hand? It's been disabled for the last 15 minutes. My technical team intercepted your wireless signal and replaced it with dead air. You're pressing a button connected to nothing. Vance's face went white. His thumb jabbed the trigger once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Nothing happened. No explosion. No fire. Just the soft plastic click of electronics that no longer functioned. You're bluffing, Vance said, but his voice shook. Test me. Morrison stepped forward, flanked by additional agents who'd come through the compound behind her. Press it again, see what happens. See, or accept that you've lost and surrender with whatever dignity you have left. For a long moment, Vance stood frozen in indecision. Then his hand dropped, the useless detonator falling to the dirt at his feet. His shoulders sagged. The armor of certainty and control he'd worn for decades cracked and fell away, leaving behind only an old man facing consequences he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. I was protecting America, he said quietly. Not to anyone in particular, maybe to himself, maybe to history. Everything I did was for this country. You were protecting your own power. Morrison gestured and agents moved forward to secure him. The United States of America doesn't need men like you deciding who lives and who dies. That's what courts are for. That's what juries are for. That's what democracy means. They cuffed Vance with practiced efficiency, reading him his rights in voices devoid of sympathy or mercy. He didn't resist, didn't speak. just stood there as his empire collapsed around him, as the life he'd built on secrets and violence finally came due. Caleb watched it happen and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a hollow exhaustion that settled into his bones like winter cold. Vance in handcuffs didn't bring Jessica back, didn't erase 6 years of grief and nightmares, didn't undo the damage done to Ava or the fear Riley had experienced, or the death of Williams and the injuries to Burke and Patterson. Justice wasn't healing. It was just the end of bleeding. Chief Mercer. Morrison approached him as agents loaded Vance into an armored vehicle. You should know. We have your daughter. She's safe at our field office in Concord. Asking for you. Probably time you went and got her. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. Riley. Safe. Alive. Waiting for him. Thank you. His voice was rough, barely functional. I have to. Go. Morrison's expression softened slightly. We'll need your statement eventually, but that can wait. Your daughter's been through enough. Get her home. Caleb turned to find Marcus already standing beside an FBI vehicle, keys in hand. Come on, Ghost. Let's go get your girl. The drive to Concord passed in a blur. Caleb sat in the passenger seat, his hands shaking with delayed adrenaline and the overwhelming need to see Riley, to hold her, to confirm that she was really okay. Ava rode in the back, quiet and introspective, processing everything that had happened in the past 30 hours. You did it, she said finally. You stopped him. We stopped him. Caleb looked at her in the rearview mirror. You're the one who kept those backups, who built the redundancies, who remembered who you were even after they tried to erase you. You're the hero in this story, Ava. I don't feel like a hero. Her voice was small. I feel like someone who woke up from a nightmare and discovered 7 years had passed. I have memories of being Ava Kensington, building a company, making friends, living a life. But now I don't know what's real and what's programming. Who am I supposed to be now? Whoever you choose. Caleb met her eyes. Vance doesn't own you anymore. The conditioning is breaking down. You get to decide what comes next. I don't know how to do that. None of us do, Marcus said from the driver's seat. We all just make it up as we go and hope we're not screwing up too badly. But Ava, you survived torture. You survived having your identity erased. You survived 7 years living a lie and still found the strength to fight back when it mattered. You're tougher than you think. They reached the FBI field office just after midnight. The building was a nondescript concrete structure that could have been a bank or insurance office, anonymous and forgettable. But to Caleb, walking through those doors, it was the most important building in the world, because Riley was inside. An agent led them through security checkpoints and down fluorescent-lit corridors that all looked identical until they reached a conference room where a small figure sat at a table too large for her, still clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes red from crying but dry now. Daddy! Riley launched herself across the room, and Caleb caught her mid-flight, pulling her against his chest and holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. She wrapped her arms around his neck with desperate strength, her face buried against his shoulder, and he could feel her trembling. I've got you, he whispered into her hair. I'm here. You're safe. I've got you, baby. I was so scared. Riley's voice was muffled. The bad men said they'd hurt you if I didn't go with them. They said you'd be okay if I just stayed quiet and did what they said. They lied. Caleb pulled back enough to see her face, to brush tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. But you were so brave. Just like Mom. You stayed strong, and now it's over. The bad men can't hurt us anymore. Promise? I promise. For real this time. And this promise, Caleb knew, was one he could actually keep. Riley finally noticed Ava standing in the doorway, watching them with an expression of profound longing, mixed with something that might have been grief for the childhood she couldn't remember, for the normal life that had been stolen from her. You saved my dad, Riley said, wiping her nose on her sleeve. Marcus told me. He said you helped stop the really bad man. Your dad saved me first. Ava's voice was gentle. Twice, actually. I'm just returning the favor. Are you going to stay with us? After everything's fixed? The question hung in the air, innocent and complicated all at once. Caleb looked at Ava, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes, the fear of hoping for something that might be taken away. If she wants to, Caleb said carefully. If she needs time to figure out who she is and what she wants, we'll understand. But Ava, for what it's worth, you're family now. You fought beside us, bled for us. That counts for something. It counts for everything, Ava said quietly. I don't know who I was before Vance erased me, but I know who I want to be now, and that person wants to help you rebuild. Both of you. Riley considered this with her characteristic seriousness, then nodded once. Okay, but you should know, Dad makes terrible pancakes. Someone's going to have to teach him. The laugh that escaped Caleb was unexpected, half sob and half genuine amusement. That's fair, I do make terrible pancakes. Among other things, Marcus added, grinning, your coffee could strip paint. Noted, Caleb stood, Riley still in his arms despite being slightly too big to carry comfortably. Can we go home? Real home, not a safe house or FBI facility, just home. We'll need statements, the agent who'd escorted them said. But Director Morrison has authorized a 48-hour grace period. Get some rest. Spend time with your daughter. We'll handle the paperwork later. They left Concord as the first gray light of dawn was breaking over the mountains. Marcus drove them back to Pennsylvania, back to the small town where Caleb had tried to build a normal life, and had instead found himself dragged back into the violence he'd tried to escape. But this time felt different. This time the violence had ended not with more death and running, but with justice and closure and the possibility of something better on the other side. The repair shop looked exactly as they'd left it. Bullet holes in the walls, blood still staining the concrete, wreckage from the firefight scattered across the floor. It should have felt like a crime scene. Instead, it felt like a starting point. We'll rebuild, Caleb said, surveying the damage. Better security. Reinforced walls. Maybe expand into something bigger than just auto repair. A training facility, Ava suggested. She'd been quiet during the drive, processing everything, but now her voice carried a new certainty. For veterans transitioning to civilian life, teaching them skills, helping them adjust, the company I built, Kensington Tech, I can repurpose it. Use the resources for something good instead of weapons development. That's a hell of an idea. Marcus looked impressed. You'd have plenty of customers. Lots of guys coming back from deployment with nowhere to go, no idea how to function in the normal world. Nothing about this world is normal, Caleb said, looking at the three of them. His daughter, his old friend, and the woman who'd started as a stranger and become something more in the space of 2 days. But maybe we can make it better anyway. The next weeks passed in a strange mixture of bureaucracy and healing. Caleb and Ava spent hours giving statements to FBI investigators, walking them through every detail of Vance's operations and the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed American democracy. The media coverage was intense. Every network running stories about the rogue colonel who'd built an illegal surveillance and assassination program, about the AI system designed to kill American citizens, about the web of corruption that had protected him for years. Some of the coverage was accurate. Most of it was sensationalized. All of it was exhausting. But through it all, Riley remained Caleb's anchor. She returned to school surrounded by extra security that made her simultaneously embarrassed and reassured. She made new friends and told them her dad was basically a superhero, but don't tell him I said that. She woke up crying from nightmares some nights, and Caleb would hold her until the fear passed, reminding her that the bad men were gone and the world was safe again. It wasn't entirely true. The world was never completely safe, but it was safer than it had been, and that had to be enough. Williams's funeral was held on a gray November day that felt appropriate for saying goodbye to a man who'd died fighting for something bigger than himself. Burke and Patterson attended in wheelchairs, still recovering but alive and determined to heal. The team gathered to honor their fallen brother, and Caleb gave the eulogy because Williams had no family left, and someone needed to tell the truth about how he'd lived and why he died. He came out of retirement for this, Caleb told the assembled mourners. He had a safe life, a quiet life, and he gave it up because I asked him to. Because stopping Vance mattered more than safety. I'll carry that responsibility for the rest of my life. But I'll also carry the memory of his courage, his loyalty, and his terrible sense of humor. We're all diminished by his loss, but we're all better for having known him. After the funeral, Hernandez pulled Caleb aside. You did right by him, Ghost, by all of us. Vance is behind bars, his network is being dismantled, and people are asking the right questions about oversight and accountability. That's legacy. That's worth dying for. I'd rather he was alive, Caleb said. So would I. But we don't get to choose how we go out. We only get to choose what we stand for while we're here. Hernandez gripped his shoulder. William stood for something. That counts. Colonel Rowan Vance's trial became a media circus that stretched through the winter and into spring. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, the Helix files, testimony from victims like Ava, financial records proving corruption at the highest levels of government. The defense tried every strategy imaginable, from claiming national security necessity to arguing that Vance had been operating under valid though classified orders. None of it worked. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 47 counts. Vance was sentenced to consecutive life terms without possibility of parole, effectively ensuring he'd die in prison. He showed no emotion when the verdict was read, maintaining his composure until the end, still believing somewhere in his narcissistic core that history would vindicate him. Caleb attended the sentencing with Ava and Riley. When the judge asked if the victims wanted to make impact statements, Ava stood. "You took my identity," she said, her voice steady and strong. "You took 7 years of my life, erased memories I'll never recover, and turned me into a tool for your ambitions. But you didn't take my strength. You didn't take my ability to choose what happens next. And I choose to make sure no one else suffers what I suffered. I'm dedicating my company and my resources to helping victims of psychological conditioning and military veterans who need support. That's your legacy, Colonel Vance. Not fear, not power, just people working to undo the damage you caused." Vance looked at her for a long moment, and Caleb thought he saw something flicker in those cold eyes. Not regret, exactly, but acknowledgement. Recognition that he'd lost not just his freedom, but the narrative itself. Then the marshals led him away, and Caleb never saw him again. Spring came to Pennsylvania with the gentle insistence of life reasserting itself after winter. The repair shop's reconstruction finished in March, and Caleb reopened it with a new name, Mercer Security and Engineering. The shop still fixed cars. That would always be part of who he was. But now it also offered self-defense training, security consulting, and job placement assistance for veterans transitioning to civilian work. Ava relocated Kensington Tech's headquarters to a building just 3 blocks away. She'd restructured the entire company, pivoting away from military contracts and toward humanitarian technology, disaster response systems, medical AI that helped doctors in underserved areas, educational programs for kids in failing school districts. The work was slower and less profitable than weapons development, but it let her sleep at night. She and Caleb started dating in April, taking things slow because they were both carrying trauma, and Riley needed stability. But there was something there, something that had been forged in fire and violence, and had somehow transmuted into something gentler, something like hope. Riley turned 9 in May, and they threw her a birthday party at the shop with all her new friends, and half the town showing up because small-town communities rallied around one of their own who'd faced down evil and survived. She wore a tiara and made everyone sing happy birthday 3 times because, as she explained to Caleb, she'd missed enough celebrations during the scary time and was making up for it. Watching her blow out the candles, face bright with joy, surrounded by people who loved her, safe and happy and alive, Caleb felt something in his chest finally release. The grief of losing Jessica would never fully fade, but it no longer defined him. He'd kept his promise to her, keep Riley safe, whatever it takes. And he'd done more than that. He'd given their daughter a future worth living in a world marginally better than it had been before. That night, after the guests had left and Riley had finally crashed from sugar overload, Caleb found Ava sitting on the shop's front steps, watching stars emerge from the twilight sky. "You okay?" he asked, settling beside her. "I've been remembering more," she said quietly. Fragments from before. My real childhood, my real family. It's disorienting, having 2 sets of memories competing for space. But I think I'm starting to integrate them, starting to figure out who I am when I'm not being Vance's tool or anyone else's weapon. Who is that? Someone who wants to build instead of destroy. Ava leaned against his shoulder, comfortable and close. Someone who wants to help your daughter grow up strong and safe. Someone who wants to see if this thing between us can be something real and lasting. It already is real, Caleb said. Everything else is just details. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, and Caleb thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The violence and loss, the fear and fury, the impossible choices and desperate gambles. All of it had led here to this quiet evening in a small Pennsylvania town, to a life being rebuilt from the ruins of everything that had come before. Marcus joined them eventually, carrying 3 beers he'd liberated from Caleb's fridge. "Thought you might need these. Big day." "Every day's a big day lately," Caleb observed, accepting the bottle. "True, but some days are bigger than others." Marcus raised his beer and toast. To Williams, to Burke and Patterson, to everyone who fought to stop a monster and paid the price. To Jessica, Caleb added quietly, who taught me what bravery really looks like. To second chances, Ava said, and the people brave enough to offer them. They drank to that, 3 survivors sitting on a mechanic shop's front steps, carrying scars that would never fully heal but had at least stopped bleeding. The night deepened around them, cool and clear, full of possibilities they were just beginning to imagine. Inside, Riley slept peacefully for the first time in months, no nightmares chasing her through her dreams. On her bedside table sat 3 dog tags strung on a silver chain, a birthday gift from Ava that Caleb had helped design. The first tag read, Caleb Mercer, Father and Protector. The second, Ava Kensington, Warrior and Innovator. And the third, in Riley's own careful handwriting, Riley Mercer, Future World Changer. They hung on the chain like promises made and kept, like proof that even in the darkest moments, even when violence threatened to destroy everything good and gentle, there was still room for hope, still possibility for healing, still the chance to build something better from the wreckage of what came before. Caleb had spent 6 years trying to escape his past, trying to pretend he was someone other than the warrior he'd been trained to be. But the events of these past months had taught him something important. He didn't need to choose between being a protector and being a father, between being a man of violence and a man of peace. He could be both. He could use the skills that had once been weapons to build defenses instead, could turn the training that had made him dangerous into something that kept others safe. He could be the man Riley needed and the man Jessica had believed he could become. 3 months later, on an August afternoon when the Pennsylvania heat made everything feel lazy and slow, Caleb stood in the backyard of their new house, a modest place with good bones and a big yard where Riley could play, and watched Ava teaching his daughter how to change a tire. They were laughing about something, their heads close together, and the scene was so perfectly normal that it made his throat tight. "You're staring," Marcus observed. He'd stopped by for dinner, as he did most Sundays now, part of the family they'd built from the fragments of their military brotherhood. "Just appreciating what we've got," Caleb said. "Never thought I'd have this again after Jessica died. Never thought I'd want it. Life has a way of surprising us, usually at the worst possible moment, but occasionally at the best ones too." Marcus clinked his beer against Caleb's. "You earned this, Ghost. Don't let guilt make you think otherwise." "I'm working on it." And he was. Therapy helped. So did time. So did watching Riley grow up happy and confident, seeing Ava slowly piece together her fractured identity into something whole and strong. Some days are easier than others. That's all any of us can ask for. Marcus checked his watch. "Speaking of which, I should get going. Got a date tonight with that teacher from Riley's school. What was her name again?" "Miss Rodriguez. And don't mess it up. Riley likes her, which means if you break her heart, my daughter will never forgive you." "Noted. No pressure or anything." Marcus grinned, then grew serious. "Caleb, I know I don't say it enough, but I'm proud of you. What you built here, what you survived, what you're creating for Riley. It's good work." "We built it," Caleb corrected. "All of us together. I couldn't have done any of it alone." After Marcus left, Caleb joined Ava and Riley in the yard. His daughter had grease on her nose and a triumphant expression. "I did it," Riley announced. "Changed the whole tire by myself. Well, Ava helped a little, but mostly me." "I'm impressed." Caleb examined her work, finding it actually competent despite her age. "Where'd you learn to be so handy?" "From you, dummy." Riley rolled her eyes with the casual sass of 9-year-olds everywhere. "I've been watching you fix things my whole life. Someone's got to carry on the family business when you're old." "I'm not that old," Caleb protested, but he was smiling. "You're ancient," Riley informed him seriously. "Like, at least 40. 38, Caleb corrected. "See? Ancient." Riley hugged him around the waist, leaving grease prints on his shirt. "But that's okay. I still love you anyway." "Lucky me." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the apple shampoo smell that never seemed to fade no matter how dirty she got. "Now go get cleaned up. Dinner's in 20 minutes. Riley bounded toward the house with the boundless energy of childhood, leaving Caleb and Ava alone in the golden afternoon light. She moved to stand beside him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me a place to land. For letting me be part of this family you've built. For not giving up on me when I couldn't remember who I was." Ava looked up at him, her hazel eyes clear and honest. "I know we're taking things slow. I know there's still a lot to figure out. But Caleb, I need you to know this is what I want. You, Riley, this life. Not because Vance programmed me to want it, because I choose it." "I choose it too," Caleb said. And then, because words were sometimes insufficient, he kissed her. Soft and gentle, and full of all the promise that neither of them had been sure they deserved, but were learning to accept anyway. When they finally pulled apart, Ava was smiling. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Caleb looked at their house, at the light glowing warm through the windows, at Riley visible through the kitchen window helping set the table. "Now we live. We build. We make sure Riley grows up knowing she's loved and safe and capable of changing the world. We help veterans find their way back to civilian life. We use everything we learned from violence to create something peaceful. And we do it all together." "Sounds like a plan." Ava laced her fingers through his. "Think we can pull it off?" "I think we already are." Caleb squeezed her hand. "One day at a time, one choice at a time, just keep moving forward and don't look back." They walked toward the house together as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and red. Inside, Riley was singing off key while she set out plates, making up lyrics about tire changes and superheroes and families that came together in the strangest ways. Caleb paused at the door, taking one last look at the evening. 6 years ago, he'd lost everything, had been broken and hollowed out by grief and guilt and the violence that had taken his wife and unborn child. He'd tried to build something normal from the ruins, had tried to be someone other than the warrior he'd been trained to be. But maybe that had been the wrong approach. Maybe the answer wasn't to deny what he was, but to transform it. To use the skills that had made him dangerous to protect instead of destroy. To turn the training that had prepared him for war into tools for building peace. He'd never stopped being a warrior. That was in his bones, in his blood, in every instinct honed by years of combat. But he could be a warrior who chose when to fight and what to fight for. Could be a protector instead of a weapon. Could be the man Riley needed and Jessica would have been proud of, and Ava was learning to trust. The scars would always remain. Jessica's absence would always be a hollow space in his heart. The memories of brothers lost and choices made and violence witnessed would never fully fade. But they didn't have to define him. They could simply be part of his story. Chapters already written, informative, but not determinative of what came next. "Dad," Riley called from inside, "dinner's ready, and I made dessert. It's probably terrible, but you have to eat it anyway." "Coming," Caleb called back. He looked at Ava, saw his own hope and determination and cautious joy reflected in her expression. "Ready?" "Always," she said. They went inside together, leaving the past behind them where it belonged, walking toward a future they were building one meal, one conversation, one ordinary, extraordinary moment at a time. The house filled with laughter and the smell of slightly burned dessert, and Riley's ongoing narration of everything she'd learned about tire maintenance. It was messy and imperfect, and nothing like the life Caleb had imagined. But it was theirs, hard-won and precious, and worth every sacrifice that had brought them to this moment. And that, Caleb thought as he sat down at the table with his daughter on one side and Ava on the other, was more than enough. It was everything. Outside, the stars began to emerge from the darkening sky, constant and eternal, watching over a small family in a small town learning to live again after surviving the worst the world could throw at them. The story that had started with violence and fear and desperate flight had ended here, in this kitchen, with love and laughter and the simple revolutionary act of choosing hope over despair. Some stories ended in tragedy, some ended in triumph. But the best ones, Caleb had learned, ended in transformation, in people becoming more than they'd been, stronger where they'd been broken, gentle where they'd been hardened, open where they'd been closed. This was that kind of story. This was their story, and it was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning.